All right, guys. So today on the show, we're having Kib and Avade. Welcome, guys. Thanks for taking the time to come in and chat about everybody's most favorite and controversial melee spec right now. If you guys want to just give a quick little intro to yourselves, who you are, what you do, etc., just so we're all on the same page of what's going on. Kib, why don't you go ahead?
I'm Kib. Well, on retail I play a warlock now because but I've been always I played Havoc all of Legion, and I still play it obviously as like an alt mostly. But yeah, I do the Wowhead Havoc guide, and I co-created the Fellhammer Discord with Dreams, and that's basically, yeah,
All right,
that's that.
Avade, my man.
I'm just a Demon Hunter player in Complexity Limit. I've been playing Demon Hunter since it came out. Used to play Resto Druid since then, but yeah, I've just been playing top end Mythic Plus and rating on Havoc for as long as I can imagine.
That's quite the change from Resto to Melee Havoc Demon
Yeah,
Hunters, but curious to hear about that one later. All right, guys. Welcome, as I said. Thanks for hanging out today. So, like we started the other shows, and we talked a bit about it pre-show as well. We'll start this in a similar fashion. Now, this one's a bit different because we always like to start with the history of the class and or spec and what changed, and going into Legion specifically and how they were before, and so on and so on. Havoc Demon Hunters obviously were introduced in Legion, so their history kind of started 4 years ago. But nonetheless, so instead of maybe the major changes or rehauls to systems that they got or resources, let's chat a bit about the initial implementation of Havoc Demon Hunter at the beginning of Legion, which I know is something you're both very fond of right now, or used to be fond of, and now things are a bit different. We'll get to that later. So why don't you take us down this road, Evade? Why don't you start us off and tell us what made Demon Hunter, Havoc Demon Hunter, so good back in the day 4 years ago? What did they excel in? How did their general systems look? Were they much different from what they are today, etc.?
well, the main thing is that the build that people played at the very start of Legion is a lot different than what's currently being played. And throughout Legion, Demon Hunter played like pretty much three different builds. But the build that people played at the start of Legion was the Momentum Bloodlet Fell Mastery build. And the reason that that's probably one of the best iterations of Demon Hunter is because like you use so many different spells. Like a lot of people make fun of Demon Hunter now for having only like 5 abilities, but back then with that build you had like 7 abilities, and there was movement involved, and you had burst damage where you could like control where your damage is, and you weren't tied to just always being in meta, and your damage wasn't always just in meta. And yeah, I mean, there weren't that many systems back then besides just legendaries.
Right.
So I don't really think legendaries necessarily changed how the class would play, but
In Legion, you
Anger of
mean?
the yeah,
Mm-hmm.
in Legion, of course.
Okay.
But yeah, just more rotational abilities, a lot of decision making in the rotation, which I mean, if you look at Demon Hunter now, has like no decision making. So yeah, there's just a lot going on.
Gabe, what do you think? What were some of the maybe strengths and weaknesses, I suppose, for lack of a better term, of Havoc back in the day with their initial design and implementation? Anything from obviously DPS type or niche to support or lack of support, whatever it may be.
Well, I think one of the biggest strength early on was the sustained damage that the spec did, without really requiring a lot of like it. We had burst, but we also had sustain. So I guess I guess that's why people hate Havoc so much. But yeah, the way like the spec flowed back then as well, it was very like I don't know a good word to put it, but it flowed nicely. Like playing it was satisfying. And like Aved was saying earlier, the different like talents that we had back then that got nerfed along the way really added a lot to the spec. Like for just Fell Mastery, for example, back then Fell Mastery generated Fury when you used it, and Fell Rush was also used to proc your momentum. So there was this nice feedback loop there of like you would proc your momentum with Fell Rush, and you'd gain some Fury doing it. to keep you going and so on and so forth. There was just like a lot of little things like that compounded onto each other and made the spec very nice to play.
Okay, so
and to
yeah, go ahead.
sorry to cut you off.
No, you're good. You're
just
good.
to mention also, it's not just that. Like he said, there's a lot of little things. Like I think it's worth mentioning. Even such as a little thing like Throwglaive being rotational back then, momentum puts you out of melee of your target pretty frequently, and having a meaningful global to spend when you're out of range, to then spend walking in after you've used that global is like huge. Like right now, if you use momentum and you try and use like Blade Dance, which is kind of the Demon Hunter staple ability. If you Fel Rush out and then you want to Blade Dance, you have to kind of like Blade Dance out of range and then walk back in. And if there's AoE, you're going to kind of miss targets. So you're like incentivized to maybe like go a little bit further out or just not Fel Rush away. It just takes away from a lot of what made that spec work. On top of the fact that in Legion, you had a lot of burst abilities, like Fury of the Eldarian, like old Fel Barrage. And so you can actually like use those burst abilities in momentum, and the window was so short, but like it was like a big burst of damage. Nowadays, we don't really have a lot of burst AoE. There's I-Beam, and that's kind of it. I mean, there's Fel Barrage as well, but Fel Barrage plus momentum, like current Fel Barrage plus momentum is like, it feels awful compared to Demonic plus momentum, or excuse me, Demonic plus Fel Barrage.
Well, when you say current, sorry, do you mean BFA or what we're seeing in beta?
Both.
Both?
Well, they changed it, so never mind. In BFA. In beta, now Demonic and Fel Barrage are on the same talent row, so you can't actually do that, which is very awkward.
But they just buff Fel Barrage, right? To be 8 targets now instead of 5. Yay.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that. We'll touch on that later. So were there any... So when did this kind of... generally what I'm understanding and what I see on Twitter from all sorts of people who play DH, including you, Lizelle, I see you in chat, hello, is generally that, and like I hear from Katsuki and people from all levels of content that play or played Havoc or whatever, is that there's, I would say, is it safe to say that generally there's a dislike on the direction over the 4 years that Havoc has taken? Like it's kind of been a downhill battle, so to speak.
Yeah,
is that fair?
They've kind of been chipping at the spec every patch.
Okay.
They just take a little bit away and take a little bit away, and yeah.
So
I think it depends on who you ask as well, because I think there are a lot of players who started playing Demon Hunter in BFA, and so they're like, that's like their understanding of how the class works, and they like it how it is. But in my opinion, I think that the class has just gotten worse as time goes on.
I see. Yeah, fair. I think that's actually part of a more interesting meta topic. We don't have to spend too much time talking about it, but just generally that aspect of like BFA babies, for lack of a better term, people that had no idea what things were like before a certain expansion, BFA and Legion maybe, but BFA definitely being one of the most pivotal ones. Things like the GCD change, people are like, what is that? And I'm like, oh my God, you don't know a time before the GCD, right? So like it filters down to things like Havoc, where they just don't know what it was like playing Havoc in Legion. Nonetheless, that being said, is there any point in Legion then that these kind of bigger changes that led into, let's say, at least a more negative direction for the majority? Obviously, there's people who won't know or won't feel the same, but is it during Legion that we started to take more of a turn towards maybe a class that was more simplistic to play or not as fun to play, or was that like a start of BFA thing?
Well, I can't speak for everyone, but I know for myself it started right after Emerald Nightmare, when they nerfed the Demon Speed trait from the artifact weapon. Originally, the trait was making so that when you use Blur, it refunded your 2 charges of Fel Rush, and you would obviously just use that to increase your momentum uptime. And they removed that, and that was the start of it for me. But I know a lot of people were happy about it because they like their defensive ability or whatever. But I really enjoyed the weaving in the blur in to reset Fel Rush.
But were there any, outside of just your personal kind of taste, were there like major points at all, like a major, like 7-1, 7-2, 7-3, anything like that, where DH was just, that was a big turning point kind of thing?
It's probably when I don't remember when the patch was, but when Nighthole came out, and they nerfed momentum a lot, and then the best talent for that role became like Nemesis, and I don't think a lot of people were big fans of Nemesis, so that was a big one
Okay.
for the majority of the community, I'd say.
What do you think of Avade?
They specifically buffed Nemesis from 20 to 25%, and then buffed Blade Dance damage, and then they moved Fellblade and Chaos Cleave or whatever. So they really, going into the Nighthold, they really wanted you to play First Blood Nemesis, and it was so obvious because of how they buffed it. They're just like, okay, well, you look at how much we buff this, you have to play it now. And then they also nerfed Demon Speed, which is like actually a huge hit to momentum, which I don't disagree, or which I disagree with a lot actually, because I think using your defensive for mobility is actually very high skill cap gameplay. And so losing something like that was just like, one of many things that you lose. And then going into later into Legion, some people didn't like Antorus because you became just a I-Beam, Chaos Strike, Demon Spite bot or whatever. So the amount of rotational abilities you used as Legion went on kind of went down, but you did get to play 3 different builds. So if you liked one kind of build in Legion, at least you got your time to shine, sort of thing.
Okay. So Legion had its ups and downs, it seems. It had its solid points. And then, happily, we reached BFA. Wink, wink, smiley face. We reached BFA. On the doorsteps of BFA, what major things happened for Havoc, guys?
The biggest one for me was the change from the Fury refund attached to Chaos Strike. All of Legion, it was attached to your critical strike. So as the expansion progressed, the more crit you had, the more refunds you'd get, and the more Fury you'd have, and it created a feedback loop. And in BFA, they just made that a flat 40%, I think, and that was it. So there was no more like stat scaling anymore. That's when basically like it became a good idea to stack verse because none of the secondary stat did anything. And that again just took something away from the spec.
Vade, started BFA. What do you think?
Yeah, pretty much right before BFA came out, they buffed First Blood and Blade Dance damage by like, I think it was something like 100+% or something like that. Because I think they had a good design of how they had an idea of how it was going to be designed going to the expansion, and they realized it didn't really work out well, and they needed to go back to something that they knew worked. So they're just like, okay, like let's just buff these talents by like so much that people have to play them because we know that this like at least functions, even though it's kind of boring. But
What was that?
Yeah,
That a substantial buff in order to force you into a gameplay style, or was they just legit undertuned? Like I remember in the Shaman show, spells were underperforming for so many months that they had to be buffed by like 150%. It didn't change their build or their loadout or anything like that. It was just generally they were so slow to get to buff spells that needed buffs. Is that what happened here? Or?
Well, I mean, your build is kind of determined by that row, right? Because if you don't have First Blood, then you're just like, you have I-Beam, Chaos Strike, Demon Spite, and then Immolation, or if you select it. It's not really like a build. I don't know how else to say.
No, fair. Yeah, no, I get where you're going.
But yeah.
So that was it. That was the major change for BFA, just the Fury refund.
They basically took part of the build in Tomb of Sargeras / Nighthold and part of the build in Antorus, and they're like, okay, let's just use this build and just have this be the build for the whole expansion. So you play Demonic First Blood, which is like takes part of the Demonic build from Antorus and part of like the First Blood from Tomb, and they made you play that build the entire expansion.
Okay.
As opposed to Legion, where in Emerald Nightmare you played Momentum, Tomb / Nighthold you play like Chaos Blades Nemesis, First Blood / Chaos Cleave, and then in Antorus you played Demonic, Blind Fury, Demonic Appetite, Chaos Cleave.
Okay, so BFA was the turning point where you had where you went from like 3 kind of different builds into just filtered into one build for the entire expansion.
Yeah, a very, very boring build, and I kind of expected at the beginning of BFA that they would change it and maybe experiment and be like, okay, let's see if people want to play Momentum now. But they never did, and a bit unfortunate. But I mean, a lot of people do like Demonic, so.
The automatic answer to this question for most people is yes, but I'll ask it anyway because I just want to gauge relative value here. How badly was Havoc hit by artifacts going away? Like, how much of your build and fun and rotation and variety and whatever else you want to insert in there depended on your artifact from Legion that you lost going into BFA?
I mean, we lost a lot, but the biggest thing was mostly like the active. Everything else was just passive stuff that played well into talents that also got removed. And then, yeah, I like the demon speed one that got nerfed after Emerald Nightmare was a big one. The artifact ability itself was a big one, and then everything else was just like when your
Balance
stuff
Blades was good.
happens, like it just does more damage. Yeah, Balance Blade was good, true. Yeah,
I
keep
also like
forgetting about that
Deceiver's
one.
Fury, because that was fun to min max on like Hell yeah. Whenever
Which one?
the one where you dodge, you gain Fury.
Oh yeah.
I just remember like using Blur for like the little skeleton, like actually give you quite a bit of Fury. That's just like a PvP slash like very minor thing. I would never like say that that was a reason, but Balance Blades, like you said, and Demon Speed going away is like very unfortunate. Although I think if Balance Blades existed right now, it'd be kind of OP.
Yes.
So, so what is it about the the build that you were forced into BFA to play? Like, what is it? What about it is so unfavorable in your opinion? Like, what makes it not fun? Because I know you're both kind of in the same boat in that you just don't really like it as much as Legion. Like, what is it about it that's just so eh?
There's not
This
really
gameplay is-
any decision making. Go. Okay. Yeah. There.
That's exactly what I was gonna say.
It's literally like you just put your buttons on your bars, and if something is not on cooldown, you press it, and that's it. That's basically you're done.
So there's just not a lot of rotational interaction. Like, you need to hit this before
Nope.
this, or this proc
There
means
is
this.
no rotational.
There's none at all.
Huh.
There's nothing like if you crit, you get more of this, or if like this, you get more of that. It's literally put the thing on your bar, and if it's not on cooldown, push that button next. There's obviously a priority of buttons. You want to like, some buttons are better than others, but at the core, it's literally like, if it's not on cooldown, press it, and there's not much more thought to it.
Okay.
Even something as simple as like just a Warlock dot or something has more depth than like all of Demon Hunter, because you at least have to think, oh, is that target gonna live long enough for the dot to be worth? Is my dot strong enough that it is worth anyway? Do I need the resources from the dot? Those kind of questions are never asked when you're playing Demon Hunter. It's very simple, like, can I hit all these targets with my I-beam, and then can I hit all these targets with my blade dance? I mean, that's it.
Check and check.
Yeah, there's literally no button that you do like, I'm gonna press this button on AoE and I'm gonna press this button on single target. Like, your rotation does not change at all. The only like quote unquote like skill into it when there's like AoE is just like, am I gonna hit like all of these, like, well, now like it doesn't really matter because you can only hit 5 of them, but before it was like, am I gonna hit all of these targets that we pulled with my blade dance? No, okay, I'm gonna move like 3 yards to the right so I can hit that one, and that was it.
I mean, there must be, not to go too crazy on negative here. There must be some redeeming qualities. Like you guys must enjoy some things about Havoc, mobility. Like, what is there anything shining bright for you, or are you just kind of holding on to the hope that SL is gonna address some things, which we'll get to in a bit, but.
Mobility is like certainly the most fun thing about the class. It's like the main reason I play it.
What about you, Kib?
And I hope
sorry,
that
go
maybe one day it reverts back to Emerald Nightmare,
Um,
But yeah,
I just like looking at momentum and remembering the old days.
all right.
But yeah, mobility is basically the only like unique thing about BFA Havoc compared to other classes. Beside that, it's just like any other class, and you just press your buttons on cooldown, and you bring 5% damage to the casters.
So okay, this is going to be a weird question because it'll segue into obviously a hot topic about how much Havoc brings and why everybody's so salty about them all the time, etc. Well, that'll be a beast to tackle in a bit. But that aside, is there anything that you think like Havoc was lacking throughout the expansion that they wouldn't have been brought into a raid if they didn't bring 5% physical or had their survivability? Like, do you think they were just kind of powerhouses the entire BFA, or were they just kind of carried by their need to be present in raids?
I think that's entirely dependent on how strong certain range DPS specs are
Okay.
in the raid, and not actually how strong Havoc is. And it's not. I'm not talking about the 5%. I'm just talking about like, you know, how
Mhm.
many warlocks or how many mages do we want to bring in on this fight?
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, Havoc is always brought because of the magic debuff. It's just a matter of whether or not you want to bring more. And I wouldn't necessarily say that like Havoc was necessary to bring, for most fights, to bring a second. But I don't think there's anything that really prevented them. I mean, it's safer to just compare them to other melee, and I mean, honestly, they have good survivability. They just do good damage. There's really not much to say. I mean, there weren't like soaking mechanics where you need rogues, feint, and cloak like Tomb or something like that in the entire expansion. It felt like, unless I'm forgetting about something.
No, not really, but it's mostly that, but as well that we got like very very strong Azerite trait in Furious Gaze that basically like carried the specs damage for the whole expansion. Every single proc that occurred in the expansion was like all a hasted RPPM proc, and Furious Gaze gave you like a gajillion haste. So, that's why you see damage breakdown from Havoc being like all the procs at the top.
A gajillion. How about that?
Yeah.
Accurate number.
Well, that's how it feels like. Like it's a lot of haste.
So how dependent and how much did like essences and then after that corruption help for DH? Like to version 2 of you lose this massive board power going into SL, like is that gonna smack you guys pretty hard, or are you pretty well off at a core level without these things?
I mean,
Depends on how they tune it.
yeah, it depends on tuning, but then again, like if you go Ventier, like you basically replace your essence damage by Sinful Brand, and nothing changed really. So,
How about that infinite stars going away though?
well, that was another thing that was hasted RPPM that got boosted massively by Furious Gaze being a thing, and Furious Gaze is back now. So,
I would say at the start of, the corruption patch, because of how easy it was to fit like a tier 3 infinite stars into a budget, it made Havoc good. But all the stat amp classes eventually like became better than it. I don't think Havoc losing corruption is going to be like massive. I think the only thing that carries their corruption is Furious Gaze, and I'm not a fan of Furious Gaze because it creates all these scaling problems, and all of your damage is sources that are not your own. And so if they balance Demon Hunter the next expansion around having their actual abilities do damage but then remove Furious Gaze, then that's fine. That's perfect.
Okay. So let's open up a bit of the can of worms here. With I guess with other shows, a lot of the time the theme is, especially when you have things like Windwalker, Feral, Ret, whatever. A lot of the theme often starts to become, are you really that bad? Is it more like a community perception thing? Give us the actual details on these off meta specs and how they're performing. Havoc, not an off meta spec, no pun intended. But has an entirely different kind of community perception behind it, because in all these shows we have had and seeing everywhere, people are very angry towards Havoc Demon Hunters. Not the players, you guys are lovely people, some of you. But for the most part, the comparison is always, why bring me when you can bring a Havoc? Like every time, right? I mean, even Rogue said it, oddly enough, to a certain extent. Because you guys just bring a bit of everything, right? You have good survivability, you have great mobility, you have great utility, darkness, 5% magic amp. You know, you have good damage, you can focus damage, you can burst damage, you can sustain. What do you guys like agree? Like, do you think you have too much for your class? Like, just objectively speaking here, obviously everybody wants their class to be OP and stuff, but do you think you have too much? Does some of this power need to be spread out amongst melee, etc.? Like how do you view that kind of community perception that, you know, you guys are the reference of why bring me when you could just bring a Havoc because you have so much, seemingly on a class that's also just, as you guys are saying, very, very simple to play, right? Like baseline.
Yeah, I mean, we
Well,
have. I mean, yeah. I was just waiting to see if Avade was gonna take that one, but I can
no,
go.
I mean,
I mean,
both of you guys, right? Like, I want to hear.
the
I'm
the
curious to hear your
spec,
thoughts.
It's a lot.
the
I'm
spec,
thinking.
the spec does have like a lot of things, but I mean, there's no like denying that. I just don't know if I just don't know if the issue is Havoc having too much of everything, or the other specs only having one thing and not like a little bit of everything. You know what I mean? Because like like rogues back, I remember like in Siege, like Rogue had like smoke bomb and that was taken away, and that could basically be like, you know, if you give smoke bomb back to Rogue as a defensive ability for the raid, is that going to be the new like staple? Because like they have cloak, they have feint, they could have like smoke bomb as like a raid cooldown. Like it just, yes, Havoc has all these things, like you cannot like deny it, it's there. But is it because Havoc has all these things that it's like pointed towards, or because the other spec don't have enough, like don't have the same things that, you know, like, is the solution removing stuff from Havoc or giving more to other specs?
Yeah, no,
I
like
don't really know.
I get it, and clearly, like, well, two things here, right? Do you think Havoc has more of this utility and survivability because baseline they're just made to be more simple to play, more of, you know, more of a like a lower skill floor for players to get accustomed to, and like, how do you think? What is your opinion? Like, how do you think Blizzard should approach that? Should a couple more classes get magic amp? Should, you know, should like more raid CDs come back to compete with darkness? Like what do you think of Avade? Because for sure, right? Like Havoc gets a lot, for whatever reason. I'm not really sure the design decision in that direction, but you guys have a lot compared to most other melee. Some of it is roster bloating too. I mean, you got how many melee specs for usually 3 to 5 spots in a raid, right? But but what do you think of it?
Sorry if I had a slow response on Discord's like lagging. But,
Yeah, no, I got you.
I think that, like Kib said, if other classes had raid cooldowns, for example, like Smoke Bomb, they'd have maybe a higher chance of being brought. But I think it's easy to make comparisons to Havoc because, like, you know, you could say, oh, Rogue has Cloak and Demon Hunter has Netherwalk, but then they don't have Smoke Bomb. Or like a Ret Pally can say, well, I have Hodge and they have Fel Eruption, but they have Darkness and I don't, or something like that. So like, I think Havoc has one of like kind of everything that everybody wants. And actually, Havoc is kind of confused me going to BFA because I actually gained more stuff than other classes lost going to BFA. I think other classes just should be utility wise more like Demon Hunter, and that's how it should be. I don't think it should be, oh, you know, fuck Demon Hunter, you know, remove their Fel Eruption, remove their Darkness. Although I do think they should remove the 5% magic debuff, but I think other classes need those sorts of things. And you can see in Shadowlands, DK got AMZ, and that's like huge for them, right? In fact, I think a lot of classes got a lot of different things. I mean, I couldn't even begin to name all of them, but I think when this expansion starts, people aren't going to be making that comparison anymore. Because going into Shadowlands, Demon Hunter's utility and everything has kind of just stayed the same. So,
how would you guys like to see Blizzard approach like from a bigger picture here, not just a Havoc issue. How would you like to see them approach the fact that so many classes and specs have like special snowflake kind of things, for lack of a better term? They have, Havoc or Demon Hunters, only ones that bring 5% Magic Camp. Monks, only ones that bring 5% physical. Now that scrolls are gone, only warriors for 5% AP, only priests for 5% fort, only mages for AI. What else? They nerfed drums to make. They nerfed drums recently to make Bloodlust / Heroism even more important for the base classes. Engineering res is gone, so now all of a sudden your only res things and plus especially are the classes that bring reses. It seems like they're almost doubling down on the unique stuff to try and make people feel special. Whereas, at least personally, I'm of the opinion that they need to kind of homogenize a bit, like more than one class should have 5% magic camp, things like that. That's the direction I'd like to see it going, but I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts on this kind of very restrictive design in terms of comp building.
I would have liked to see... Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Go. No, you go. I started the last one.
You guys are so nice.
I would have liked to see a scroll for like magic debuff going into the next expansion, and then they just were like, okay, no scrolls at all. I think Blizzard looks at 5% int, 5% attack power, and then 5% magic damage, and they're like, oh, it's all 5. They must be the same, right? But it's absolutely not like that at all. And that's just a huge misunderstanding. Same thing with battle res. They're like, oh, okay, 3 of the 12 classes have battle res. That's fair. Mage has bloodlust. Battle res is insane in Mythic Plus. Extremely powerful, extremely needed, but they think it's like the equivalent. And so, yeah, I think they do need to homogenize a lot of these different things. Add engineering VRes back so that other classes can do part of what other classes can do, but maybe not as good because of how powerful these things are. So I think if right now in BFA there was a scroll for magic damage, I mean, you would greatly consider bringing maybe something else instead of a Demon Hunter, to maybe even a progression fight or something like that. But just depends on like what classes do damage.
But outside of profession things where you get like 60 to 80% effectiveness of the base thing, do you think they should just give other classes that power? Like give, I don't know, like a Ret Paladin or like Paladin's magic debuff or, like that kind of thing? Like should more than one class have access to that unique strength? Kib, what do you think?
Well, all the 5%, ideally for me, they would just remove them, because then the problem is solved. You just take them out of the game. But if they really want to keep them, then yeah, I'd give them to like 2 or 3 classes, so that you could you'd want to have that buff in your raid, but you wouldn't have to work too hard to get it at the same time. That's what I would do, but ideally I would just axe them out of the game completely.
Yeah,
because it doesn't do anything. It's just like this guy's in the raid and you do that you do a little bit more damage. It doesn't provide any gameplay. It does, it's just like it's not even a maintenance buff. It's just a thing. It doesn't do anything.
It's always interesting to hear like these thoughts from more veteran players or more experienced players or higher end players, because actually, before I say what I'm about to say, Avade, do you agree with that? Like, what are your thoughts on how they should handle that kind of thing?
I agree. I don't think it needs to be in the game. It serves no purpose. In fact, I don't even know why they added it to begin with. Maybe in BFA they thought Havoc wasn't going to have a place in a raid, so they're like, okay, let's give them this so that people want to bring at least one or something like that. No, I just no idea why they actually did that, but I don't think that sort of stuff is good for the game. And I think if you're going to have something like that in the game, you should probably give it to the spec that is the worst, so that it can at least be not the worst. I don't know. That's about it.
Yeah. So what I was going to say, my thought was that it's really interesting to hear thoughts on, and to a certain extent, it's part of the same meta issue or concept with the whole Covenant choice thing, right? Is that there are players that put emphasis and interest in lore and decision making and feeling unique and powerful versus a different type of crowd, more present here at least, that just sees numbers, right, and doesn't affect, like, this doesn't help gameplay, this doesn't whatever. It's not even about like an elitist 1% thing. But I mean, there are people that like, yeah, there are people out there that like to be like, oh yeah, I'm the warrior, I'm the guy that brings 5% AP, you know, like I feel good about it, versus, well, what you guys were saying, which is like just shit it all away, like just get rid of it. Yeah, I was pretty disappointed when I didn't see that more classes are getting these buffs. It's a really jarring experience, right? For like,
Yeah, I mean, at the same time, like, would that same guy be happier as a player if his class was like altered in some way that made it satisfying to play, instead of his satisfaction coming from the fact that just by being present he makes the boss take 5% more physical damage? Like, you know, like, it's way more satisfying, to use the warrior example, to be like, okay, now I'm gonna press my shout, and the whole raid, because of my shout, will survive this mechanic that would otherwise kill the raid. That to me is way more satisfying than being like, hey guys, look, I hit the boss, now I can jump up the platform, but he takes 5% more damage for the whole fight now.
not gonna lie, this past week we did like a sale, and our sale guy was a Havoc Demon Hunter, and then I didn't have to play like Vengeance on a couple fights because the guy would just tag the boss and died. I was like, all right, the debuff's up, we're good, I don't need to bring my Vengeance. Yeah, I mean, I hear you. I mean, they're not mutually exclusive though, right? You can still have a nice core design, but then still provide something for the raid. But I just think they've gone too far, and often players like you guys, myself, a lot of people, right? You don't feel like it starts to go the opposite way, right? You don't feel in a 5-man that if you bring a Havoc Demon Hunter, it's a great boost for the group, the 5% damage. Rather, you feel like, oh, I'm still missing all these other things. I don't feel optimal. I don't feel like I'm doing my maximum potential. I don't know. Well, Avade
Some
actually,
people like to capitalize on there being a magic debuff because they're like, oh, cool, I get an automatic raid spot. And I don't know. That's just like, it's just another thing that I think is bad for the game if you think that way. It's just like, because I'm sure there are a lot of people who are like, who feel great because they're just like, okay, I'm always going to be brought to every single raid fight, no questions asked, easy. Whereas like people actually had to like, I mean, this is a bit disingenuous, but like people actually had to like compete for the raid spots. I'm sure like that still happens, obviously, but
yeah, no, that's fair.
I can only see that's the only reason somebody would want something like that to stay in the game. There's no other reason, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's just weird, right? Because as objective as you try to be, ultimately you're still subjective towards topics, right? Like, it is genuinely hard for you guys and even for me to like put your shoes in a very casual player, put yourself in a very casual player's shoes, right? Somebody that doesn't care about like almost any form of M+, doesn't really raid, is just there for like the fun of it, maybe very minor group content. It's very polarizing viewpoints, and I think that's honestly where a lot of the unknown comes from like a more veteran community being like, why are you guys doing this, Blizzard? Like, what's going on? Versus that they like, benefit of the doubt, they probably have some data to show that people like this. It's just those people, you know, don't do what you guys do.
I mean, I can safely say that, I mean, I've played this game casually at some point, so like I kind of do understand what it's like to be in that kind of person's shoes, and I don't know, like getting the satisfaction, like Kib said, of just putting up the buff doesn't actually do anything.
Fair.
Pressing Rallying Cry, for example, does, and I promise you, no matter what play you are, like that's an obvious feeling to have, and it's not like,
yeah, an active versus a passive is what you're saying, like something that requires some skillful input, albeit small.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I think that's very fair. Let's get this train back on the track for more Havoc specifically. So we've chatted a bit, or a lot rather, about all of its essential history leading up to SL. And what I've gathered here, and you know, feel free to jump in a second and tell me if I'm wrong here, is in your guys' opinions, the main issue currently, end of BFA right now, with Havoc, outside of any community perception or whatever, is that they're just bland as fuck to play, right? They're just boring and simplistic, and not a lot of button interactions, baseline, etc. Is that accurate? Is that fair to say?
Yep.
Is there anything you want to add to that as an issue you see in terms of the core Spec's design?
I mean that's what it is right now. You have Furious Gaze and you go like brrr, and you go fast, and that's basically it. Like that's the whole like appeal to the spec beside like the mobility that you have. But obviously on a raid encounter, like you need your mobility when you need it, but most of the time you're just standing next to the boss, hitting it like every other melee.
What do you think of it? Anything else lacking in the Havoc department, or is it just the simplistic nature of the class that is not appealing?
Yeah, I mean, it's just the simplistic nature of like not having that many rotational abilities, having some of them tied to just talents, and then also just not having complexity in the rotation. Like Kib has said before, spell hooks, interesting like thought decisions that you have to make, on the fly in the rotation rather than it just being a binary. Okay, is this on cooldown? Is it not? Sort of thing.
Yeah. Or
That is
just
like the biggest.
reacting
That
to
is
a
the
proc.
biggest thing. Oh yeah, sure. It procs as well.
Just that would add a lot.
So then, obviously, my next question will be, how do we fix this? Generically, you guys just said it, but do you have any more specific things in mind on what they could do with the way it is currently now at the end of BFA that would make it more appealing to play? Maybe even like returning it to some kind of Legion interaction or something new. Like, have you guys given that any thought outside of just, oh, like it just needs more depth in terms of procs and the interactions?
Well, it's
Go ahead.
sorry. It one of the more like I can't think of anything that's more interesting than momentum was in Legion. And the thing is, you could have something as simple like it was back then of having Demon Blades be your generator, having Chaos Strike be your spender, and having Throglaive be like your used on cooldown ability. And it was still 10 times more interesting, 10 times more difficult to play, but also was really simple to understand from like a basic level, which is like perfect, right? You want people who are new to the class to understand it, and you want people who are really good at the class to be able to like min-max it. There isn't really anything else like momentum, and current momentum isn't even the same, that gives Demon Hunter some sort of mechanic to play around. I think adding like First Blood baseline would kind of fix some problems. I also think adding Throglaive / Bloodlet baseline would fix some problems. But the class would still feel like it doesn't have like some sort of like cool thing that it can play around, like momentum. I feel like momentum is just spoiled, my opinion of the class, to be completely honest. But current momentum is not even close to being the same as it used to be, because it's just designed differently. But
just for noob purposes, like myself, for not being very familiar with Havoc, what was old momentum versus current momentum?
Yeah, so current momentum, say, Foul Rush increases your damage for 6 seconds for 15% damage, and then Vengeful Retreat gives you Fury. Old momentum was Foul Rush and Vengeful Retreat both activate momentum for 4 seconds, and is a 20% damage increase. So it's a shorter but bigger damage increase, and Vengeful Retreat actually procs momentum. Additionally, if you like Foul Rush back to back with old momentum, you would actually overlap the buff, but now it actually adds to it. So if you Foul Rush twice with new momentum, you'll have 6 + 6 seconds of momentum. So you can't fuck it up. So it kind of makes it a lot easier to play. And the older version is like tighter window.
Higher skill cap.
Feels like you have a lot more control. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Also, I know for a fact that Blizzard wants you to like Vengeful into Fel Rush, and so they put that's why they took Vengeful away from being momentum. And like, to be completely honest, like, you would think like when you first start playing a Demon Hunter, you Vengeful into Fel Rush, you're like, oh man, that's so cool, I landed right where I started. But it's just actually awful, because you have to hit the target with Vengeful Retreat to get the Fury. So you can't like go out of melee, Vengeful, and then Fel Rush back or whatever, or just, I don't know. It's not even optimal to be Vengefuling into Fel Rush, because they're both like, using Vengeful puts Fel Rush on a full global, whereas using Fel Rush puts everything else on a half global except Vengeful. So it's more optimal to not be doing that, but you're kind of forced to do it because you put yourself out of melee. It's like, okay, well, what's the most efficient way of getting back? Fel Rush.
So what is it like? Because I'm seeing some pretty polarizing opinions in chat as well. And now that I think about it over the months and years and whatever, every time we talk about Havoc and Havoc theory, not that it happens too often in my channel, but just generally, there's a lot of either fuck momentum or I love the momentum. Like, what is it about momentum for you to, well, let's say old momentum, that you enjoyed so much? Because I think the people that hate it, it seems to be just the type of gameplay, like kind of jumping all over the place and zooming all over the place constantly, is unappealing for some. But like, what made it so attractive for you guys?
Well, it's just that thing that the spec missing, the proc that a lot of spec have in their rotational abilities. Using, they get a proc and then they gotta press that button now, or like anything like special like that. That's basically what momentum brings to Havoc. Is the only difference is that it's not an RNG proc. You decide when it happens, so you can synchronize it with like raid events, or whatever you need to. And just that increased amount of like, you need to know what's going to come next in the boss to make sure you use momentum at the right time to get the buff for that ad, or like stuff like that. And just that increased that little bit of awareness that you need, that kind of like engages you into a spec that's otherwise extremely simple.
But do you agree with that, Avade? Actually, before I ask my next question,
Yeah, and I wanted to add that
go for it.
I think that if I see a lot of people sometimes say, "Oh, I don't like momentum because then I have no foul rush charges and I die because I can't foul rush out of something." Number one,
Noobs, am I right?
all raid
Well,
mechanics are designed with not foul rush in mind. So if you don't have foul rush available and you die to a raid mechanic, it's because you didn't move out of it. Also, you have glide, which moves you at like 180% movement speed or something like that. So you have like almost no excuse for that. Secondly, you may think, oh, well, I'm going to use my mobility for damage and then I won't have it for mobility. And it's like, well, why don't you use your mobility for damage and mobility by,
Yep.
Instead of just running away from the pack, foul rushing to the next pack and then getting there and having your momentum buff expire, how about you foul rush from one pack, spend like, a throw glaive or, something, spend like your 2 range globals, pull up your double throw glaive charges, spend those during the proc to make the most of it. There's so many things that you can do with something like that are just anybody who's saying like, oh, you wasted mobility and I don't have it. It's just an excuse. It's almost like they aren't actually playing it, and they're just thinking of like, oh, how could this be bad? Oh, this is how it could be bad. Therefore, I don't like it or whatever.
Yeah, but the thing is, it's just so much easier to complain.
Yeah.
Go on.
The thing I can totally understand is the most frustrating thing I can say is like if you're playing momentum and you're fighting a really small hitbox mob, that feels really awkward. But then again, it's also solved by Bloodlet Throglaive to some extent. Back then. I promise you, if you've never played Momentum back in Emerald Nightmare and you try and play it now, it's so bad. Like, I completely agree that it's bad because you just don't have burst abilities. You don't have meaningful range globals to spend when you're out of melee. It just feels really bad. It feels like a consistent buff rather than a burst buff, and it also, you just don't, I don't know. There's not much to it, to be completely honest, like right now. And I think it would be hard, like if they just took momentum and reverted it, I don't think that would solve the problem. I think Demon Hunter needs a couple more burst abilities. I think Glaive Tempest is a good burst ability to have, but I don't know if it would be enough. I really think Bloodlet would be good for the class because it would be good for that, but it'd also be good if you didn't want to play momentum, which I know a lot of people don't want to play, which I totally understand. But I don't think there's anybody who would really disagree with Bloodlet being baseline or in the talent tree or something.
So a couple of things here based on what you just said. Oh, based on what you both just said, actually. One is, you said if they just brought back the old momentum, it would be better, but it still would have some flaws. So what about momentum? If you were to design momentum your way, Avade and Kib, what would you do? And then part 2 to this question is, it seems like one of the things you love so much about momentum is that it adds depth to the class. Albeit unfortunately from a talent, but nonetheless it adds depth to the class. Is there somewhere else rotationally that you think you can add this kind of depth or interaction with that doesn't force players to kind of, jump all over the place and rush all over the place, or is that mobility really what makes it extra fun for you guys?
Well, I don't really think I need to redesign momentum. I would just go to the bigger damage increase, shorter duration type thing. And one other thing that they could change, and it's something that we've been tossing around as well, is just take Essence Break and make this a permanent ability, like a baseline ability of the spec, and then you can design a talent row around it, and that would like help a lot with a lot of things, because basically Essence Break would just promote a kind of like a pooling gameplay, like a pooling and spending gameplay. And if you have a talent row built surrounding that new baseline ability, you could have some ideas that could be, I don't know, you could bring some old talents back into this as like while Essence Break is up, that is now a baseline ability. Your Chaos Strike just hits every enemy around you, and that's like an old talent. Or you could just have one that makes it do well. Your Blade Dance does a dot, and that's like Trail of Ruin. That's a current talent. You could also have one that's simply your Essence Break now has 2 charges, so you can play around with the charges on it and spread out the buff to have more uptime and stuff like that. So if like one thing baseline, I would go for Essence Break and design a talent row around it, and that would add some depth to the class without forcing momentum to some degree on people.
Okay. Avade, what are your thoughts on those 2 questions?
I personally don't really know of I haven't really thought of a way to add depth to the class, because it's just, I mean, you just can do so many different little things that it would be exhausting to think about all those things. But I just think if Blizzard gave more rotational spells baseline, so for example, First Blood, or just Blade Dance being rotational single target, same as Throglaive, then they give themselves the opportunity to then add things to those abilities, and then from there they can get more creative and come up with more complex things. So right now Throglaive isn't rotational. You use it with like a legendary every so often, but you don't use it on cooldown or anything like that. They could do more with that. I don't know. It just could be anything. It could be after you throw glaive, and if it hits 3 targets, your X-Blade Dance does more damage. Just made that up off the top of my head, but
Higher that,
just
man.
with Demon Hunter baseline right now, it's I-Beam, Chaos Strike, Demon's Bite, and Immolation Aura. And that's it. That's not really much to work with. And so you right now you have to pick talents that give you more. So like First Blood, for example, you have to. It almost feels like you have to play First Blood, because imagine playing Demon Hunter without it. It's nothing. It's just a builder spender single target. I don't even know what to say.
You sound like
the only
gonna,
thing that is
like
interesting.
You're gonna explode.
Yeah. The only thing that is interesting is Unbound Chaos. I'm so glad that exists, because that is it's a great in between for people who like fel rushing but don't feel like want to be fel rushing on cooldown or something like that. Gives you burst damage. You can use it when you want. You can save the charges. If you're not playing momentum, of course you would be able to save the charges and use them whenever you want. So you can go 2 back-to-back Unbound Chaoses. Also requires you to be positioned well, but yeah.
What you specifically, Avade mentioned momentum. Now you'd want the old Legion model to come back, but it still wouldn't be perfect. What would be your ideal momentum implementation for Shadowlands?
It's honestly too much for me to say. I would honestly just bore everybody, but my honest opinion is that I think well. It can be just boiled down to, if the class just went back to the way it was in Emerald Nightmare and then they went from there, that's how I would like Demon Hunter to be. I don't think it was perfect back then. I think there were some things I didn't like. I didn't like Demon Blades being 75% chance to work sort of thing. But I just, I don't know. That's it.
Okay.
As simple as that for me.
Well, that wasn't as long as you said it would be. I feel cheated.
Well, yeah, I condensed it a lot.
Okay. What do you think about the concept that, because Demon Hunter, and we'll move momentarily here to Shadowlands stuff, but Demon Hunter definitely got some things changed in Shadowlands. Like I said, we'll talk about it in a bit, but we keep talking about Havoc being, simplistic and low skill floor, entry to the class, etc. I mean, at what point do we just say that it's by design that that's the point, right? In the world of tanking, in my world, Guardian, right? Guardian fills that role. A lot of people find it boring, it's simplistic, but at a certain extent, I think we just need to realize that Blizzard on purpose probably designed some classes to be way more simplistic, lower barrier to entry, more noob friendly, however you want to call it, with lower interaction for players to more easily grasp. Do you think Havoc falls in that category, or have they just not been listening to feedback? At what point do you think Blizzard's just well, yeah, thanks for all this feedback, Avade and Kib know how to make the class more complex, but we just don't want it to be complex, right? We want it to be noob friendly.
That's exactly what it is. And I mean, Demon Hunter right now starts at the highest possible level. This is the hero class. So I guarantee you people who buy the expansion are like, oh, look, I can skip the level 98 or whatever. And so they're just playing Demon Hunter. And so they want it to be the easiest class so that everybody, is okay with it and doesn't get screwed over by having complex mechanics. And I don't mean this to be insulting, but I say this a lot. And it's actually not meant to be insulting at all, but I actually think Demon Hunter as a class would work really, really well as a League of Legends champion, because it's not to be flame at all. I actually think it would be,
I got you.
It would be an amazing League of Legends champion. You have your meta for your R, you have your I-Beam, your Blade Dance, your Fell Rush from ability. It would just be excellent.
Right.
And that's exactly, I think, why they designed Demon Hunter how they have. Because that's the kind of person that is coming to WoW, a new player that's coming to WoW is going to love that. Because, they're used to that kind of stuff. They're not used to momentum or just keeping up buffs or anything like that.
I don't really think it's bad that they might design that spec to be kind of the intro DP melee DPS class if you want, but at the same time you could still have complex talents in the talent tree that's if that's not the reason why the talent tree is there, I don't know why it's there in the first place, but it's fine if they want to give this is the more passive talents, and it works for someone that's starting the game that doesn't want to get too overwhelmed with other things. But then when you pick this and this and that, then there's you introduce this proc, and you introduce this maintenance buff that you need to keep up, and you introduce this, and just tuning that so that yes, the guy that just starting the game can have a thing that he can play and not have to worry about anything other than just pressing a handful of buttons. But the guy that's experienced and wants to min-max everything has also the opportunity to do so by choosing other talents, which right now it's not there. The closest thing to that is momentum and unbound chaos.
Okay. Currently. Yeah, my follow-up was going to be, so then in the BFA talent tree, do you guys feel like there's not enough potential depth you can voluntarily spec into? I guess you kind of answered my question. I assume, Avade, you agree with that then?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so good segue to, now that we've kind of accumulated all of the thoughts, let's say, about Havoc, leading into Shadowlands. They did receive some changes, as at least I saw in the community, a handful of unfavorable changes to a certain extent. But let's talk about what changed for Havoc, and if any of these problems, the bigger one being the simplicity of the class, was addressed at a baseline in any way. So whoever wants to tackle this, just run us through the changes from alpha to where we are in beta right now for Havoc that players can expect. Kib or Avade, whoever wants to tackle.
Kib can grab that one.
I don't remember every change off the top of my head, but the TLDR is everything that people complain that Havoc had that they don't got nerfed, and then they added a couple talents. That's the TLDR of it.
Except demonic wards.
Yeah,
What about
they
words?
basically nerf our defensive toolkit entirely, and
What?
they swapped a couple talents around.
How much did words? How much is words doing in BFA?
10 in BFA, 10 now.
Oh, okay.
I expected them to make it lower, but then like
Yeah.
not touch blur as much. I expected them. I think that they should have nerfed blur, and they did. I think they actually did it too much. And then they left demonic wards. I'm like, okay, well, it'd be really nice if demonic wards was a little less, and then our active ability that we get to choose when we want to use it was a little stronger, so that we're passively weaker but actively stronger if used correctly, sort of thing. It just adds to skill cap.
What did they nerf about blur?
It used to be 35% DR, and now it's 20.
Oh, I see.
And then they nerfed the middle talent row. Soul Rending is 30%, down from it's base 5, and then it's up to 30, I think, like when you're in meta. Whereas in BFA, you have 20% Legion meta no matter what, even if you don't have that talented. And then with that, you have 40%.
Oh, I see.
Desperate Instinct got nerfed, even though it was like barely ever picked, from 15% to 10. And then Netherwalk is now a 3-minute cooldown, still on the global cooldown for some reason. I don't mind Netherwalk actually getting nerfed, but that thing needs to be taken off the global. It doesn't make any sense. But they just hard nerf Demon Hunters defensive like by a huge amount by doing that.
Is it? I was literally just taken aback for a second. Is this actually the Havoc spec page? 5 things? Like
Yep.
I okay. I thought I was bugged for a second. I was like,
there's
oh, I'm
gotta
on
be
page 2.
something missing there. Oh, you have all the left side talents left.
I didn't. I just spec'd in, right? Like I didn't actually choose stuff, but
Yeah. I think if you took some of the
No, I mean, if he picks the cookie cutter, it doesn't add anything to that page.
it doesn't add Fell Eruption if he picks Fell Eruption.
Oh, yeah, that's true. There's only Fell Eruption that gets
there you go.
There you go.
So moving into Shadowlands, nothing like substantial, right? No revamp in like resource or redesign rotationally on how you build and spend. Most of the stuff more or less the same. You got nerfed in a few areas defensively, it seems, but baseline, nothing really added for the spec, right? No interactions.
Well,
nothing.
they added Immolation Aura baseline, but they
true.
made
That's
a
right.
talent that gave you what the old Immolation Aura gave. So it's basically a neutral, but now you can glyph the color of your Immolation Aura since it's baseline. So whoop-de-doo.
The color? To what color?
I don't know.
Red?
I think there's a glyph to make it red or
That's kind of sick.
or purple
actually.
or maybe I don't know. But I know there's a red one for sure.
No, I don't understand what you guys are complaining about. That seems awesome. That's all you need.
The biggest thing that's going to ever change Demon Hunter playstyle isn't necessarily like what they did going into Shadowlands, but it'll be like how they tune the talents. So, for example, if they really want you to play Essence Break, they can just do that by just being like, okay, Essence Break is now a 200% damage increase for 8 seconds or some crazy number.
That's
And
right.
then now your playstyle changes like a lot because you're no longer blade dancing on cooldown. You're just building and spending, and then pooling for the damage window and then spending in the damage window.
But I mean, just from like an outsider perspective on enjoyability of what I like, playing in this game and the buttons I enjoy pressing, it seems rather frustrating. Correct me if I'm wrong. That you have to rely on talent tuning for that rather than the core of the class has that built in, and then the talents, embellish that in one way or another. I don't know. It seems a bit restrictive.
Yep. That's exactly how it is, but have you ran around Orbos double jumping and fell rushing around the center instead of running in circle on your mount?
I haven't, because I don't log in on a Havoc Demon Hunter. But that sounds super fun.
True.
Okay, one thing I didn't poke at, and you guys didn't mention, I'm not sure if it's a big deal, but I know at least like Infa bitches about it a lot. Only class to have like a 4-minute CD. I think the only spec to have a 4-minute CD, right? Your major CD. Any thoughts on that, or it just kind of is what it is? Like, not a big deal, but it's kind of irritating.
They are bigger. What's the expression? There are more important battles to fight, I guess.
Okay.
But that is definitely a battle that I want to fight at some point.
Any thoughts of it, or just me?
I'm actually a little opposite, but again, like I don't care
Okay.
that much.
Sure.
Like if Demon Hunter is a 2-minute cooldown, like whatever. Or sorry, meta. But I actually like there being something unique. There is no 4-minute cooldown in the game. The only problem I have with it is that, with IBeam being such a short cooldown and Demonic being so like, played all the time, you're in your 4-minute cooldown a lot, and so it kind of devalues your 4-minute cooldown and how it would feel.
Yeah.
So like when you press that 4-minute cooldown and that 30-second cooldown when you're not playing Demonic, you kind of feel like a god. You're just like, okay, this is like my time to do as much damage as possible in this 30-second window, and then I'm not going to have it for like another 3.5 minutes. But
that's not so
I
much
feel like
the
it
case.
gets a little bit. It definitely got watered down with the BFA version of Demon Hunter and having Demonic be the meta talent, having Demonic Appetite plus Eyes of Rage be a thing, and having I-Beam every like 23 seconds and being in meta for 10 seconds, so you're having like a massive uptime.
Okay.
But I know a lot of people want it to be 2 minutes so that it's more flexible and stuff like that. I don't really care too much, but I do think it's cool to have a unique 4-minute cooldown. And I think it's good when your meta feels impactful when you press it. But, Demonic kind of takes away from that. But I think that's mainly because I-Beam's a 30-second cooldown instead of like, a longer cooldown.
Right.
But, yeah.
All right, fair. So okay, let's dive in. Let's start to deep dive a bit here into the talent tree, the SL talent tree, the Slans talent tree. God, I hate that term. The SL talent tree here. Some things I know changed. We can kind of hammer this row by row a bit. I know you've already mentioned, for instance, the middle row, Glaive Tempest, recent edition. Although, well, recent edition, that was your active in Legion, if I'm not mistaken, right? More or less.
Yeah.
So some new things / old things added as talents. A lot of talent reshuffling, some retuning. We know that Fel Barrage is now 8 target recently instead of 5, etc. But why don't we dive into this and so we can pick your guys' brains on how the talent tree for Shadowlands is looking relative to BFA, relative to how it's been, and if it's if it looks like it's going in a good direction. Whoever wants to tackle. I mean, we could just talk about it row by row as well. But Avade, why don't you start this off?
So, I mean, you just want us to talk about the different talents? And you want to start...
We could just go row by row, right? Like just go 15,
Okay.
25, 30. And if there's not
Sure.
much to say for that row, no problem. We don't have to spend like an hour on each row or anything. But like a bunch of them did change. I know. I remember actually reading through the patch notes in general. Like there was a lot of reshuffling here. So shoot it off.
Well, the first row, everything's pretty much the same. The difference, though, is that Demonic Appetite doesn't... Demonic Appetite's kind of the same, but it doesn't have... Like, there's no other class mechanic that reduces your cooldown of your I-Beam, so that kind of went away. And I know a lot of people like that kind of mechanic. I personally, I respect that. I did not like that mechanic because you're de-incentivized to actually Chaos Strike while moving, because you may, run away from a soul and then feel bad that you just left it behind, and they're like, oh, should I go get it and then come back? Or it's like, oh, fuck it, just leave him to die. So don't like that mechanic. Some people did like it. It's a bit unfortunate that the people who did like it don't have the option to play it anymore, because I like I've said it about Legion, I think, if you liked one build, at least you got to play it. People don't get to play that build anymore. So I don't know how they would really change or fix that, but and then Fellblade's the same. Nothing changed really, as far as I'm concerned.
Useful or not useful? Is Fellblade ever taken for Havoc for anything?
Fellblade is pretty much only ever taken if you play Demon Blades because of the synergy. I don't think you would ever really pick Fellblade otherwise, unless it's just they tune it up or something like that.
Okay.
Kib would know more about that.
What do you think, Kib?
No, Fellblade is like if you pick Demon Blades, then you pick Fellblade, but you don't pick Demon's Blade because you picked Fellblade, if that makes sense.
Okay.
But yeah, Demon's Blade is the decider of if you use Fellblade or not.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's just a math equation between Blind Fury and Demonic Appetite for everything else.
Right.
Oh, and like people have been saying, Fellblade is actually an excellent ability in PvP. I think it's great, but in PvE, it's kind of just an empowered Demon's Bite. So I actually find that the dash kills you more than it helps you, like 99% of the time.
That's
It's very inconsistent when you're gonna dash or not. Like sometimes you're in melee range,
Yeah.
you press it and you move forward, and sometimes you're in melee range and you press it and you don't move at all. And that that inconsistency makes it like very awkward to use.
okay. Any other notables for the 15, or let's hammer 25?
That's pretty much it.
All right, hit me with the 25 of it.
Which one's the 25?
Insatiable
Oh.
Hunger, Burning Hatred,
okay.
and Demon Blades.
They buffed Insatiable. Well, I just
No, we have
I'm
to
used
say
to
that.
the other numbers from BFA, so I just
Yeah, no, I'm teasing.
Get
I'm not
lost.
teasing. So Insatiable, Burning, and Demon Blades.
yeah, they buffed Insatiable to be more useful now that it buffs Demon's Bite damage. Although ideally you're not pressing Demon's Bite, so it's kind of weird. The Immolation Aura or Burning Hatred being there, it actually devalues that talent slot, even though if you were to select it, it would be like the exact same as if you selected Immolation Aura last expansion. So the other two options become slightly more valuable. It pretty much just comes down to just tuning single target sort of thing. I don't think Kib would definitely know more about this road than me when it comes to like whether or not it's good in AoE or single target, but to me it just seems like, how do you want to generate your Fury? Passively over time, actively with a button that you don't actually want to press, which I'm sure is going to get outscaled at some point, and then, or do you want it to be with, you know, just passive auto attacks?
Insatiable Hunger is decent at the start, but right now it's looking like you'll just pick Burning Hatred, which is the old Immolation Aura, and Demon Blades is a thing that you pick whenever you scale enough, and you basically get more Fury out of Demon's Blade plus Fellblade than you would get from Immolation Aura and Line Fury, basically.
Is that just like a later in the expansion scaling thing?
Either that or just from a pure single target perspective as well, because the Fellblade Demon's Blade is more like patchwork kind of orientated versus the other ones. Like Blind Fury is great on Cleave, obviously, because you know it buffs Cry Beam and stuff like that. And now that Emo's baseline Burning Hatred is, like Avade said, kind of like lost some value, because you can still get the Immolation or AoE without having the talent. But yeah, that's basically it for that row. It's just a Burning Hatred versus Demon's Blade Fury generation type question.
Okay. So is this like a good row? Like, it seems like there's actually at least some consideration to different talents as opposed to just, oh yeah, this is the one talent and that's it, end of story. Like everything else is dead.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it's an okay row. None of these things do anything very exciting. Demon's Blade is nice when it is like a viable option, because like Koji said in chat, it frees up some globals, because you don't need to press Demon's Bite, you know, so that global can go towards another ability. But then you run into the occasional, like, you have no Fury to use, and the only thing you can press is Throglaive, and you might as well just, you know, AFK until your next global.
Sounds fun.
The theme of the first two rows has always just been like, how do you want to generate Fury sort of thing.
Okay. Row 30 then, Avade. Trial of Ruin, Unbound Chaos, Glaive Tempest. Actually new stuff here to talk about.
Yeah, I actually really like every one of these talents. I like Trail of Ruin because it gives you like that sort of confirmation that your Blade Dance hit a target and that you're dealing damage to it. I like Glaive Tempest because it's like gives you like a bursty AoE but frequently able to be used ability. And then I really like Unbound Chaos because it ties mobility into damage. Unfortunately, because of target capping, Trail of Ruin, you know, and Glaive Tempest become a lot worse as like, you know, numerical options and feel worse to play, right? So like if you're Blade Dancing in an AoE pack, like I said, you don't get that same confirmation like, okay, I hit every target with Blade Dance, like, because I see Trail of Ruin on everything, because you're only going to see it on 5 targets. So unfortunately, target capping kind of hurts this row's fun. But Unbound Chaos is actually a lot of fun because it's uncapped and it ties mobility into damage. I worry that they would cap that ability because it would just I don't know
Don't
how
say
that Talonver would feel. Yeah, I shouldn't
Don't
say it.
I mean, yeah, I agree. I'll make a note here. I'll tell Ian later to cap it to 5 as well, just so it's consistent with. Just kidding. Kib, what do you think about this row, the 30 row?
It's pretty much the same comments. Unbound is the most fun / versatile option of in that row. It also is nice that it's uncapped. Trail is just you blade dance, you put a dot up, so that's like a nice, quick and easy thing. And then Glaive Tempest is the new thing that was sold to us as one thing, but then was implemented as another and changed into another again. So
The old
I don't really
debate.
know what they're thinking about Glaive Tempest.
I feel like if
Are we-
Glaive Tempest was had no cooldown, but was your Fury spender, but did AOE
yeah,
instead of single target, that would be kind of interesting.
that's what they sold it as in the blue post. They're like, Glaive Tempest is back as an AoE spender, and that to me sounded like you would pick that talent and you would basically replace like your Chaos Strike with Glaive Tempest for AoE, and that could be a really cool like niche to have, and that would give you like that button to press on AoE versus the other one to press on single target that a lot of classes have that one button that they press at that target count and whatnot. But then they basically like introduce Glaive Tempest as the old like artifact ability. So uncapped, there was no cooldown on it, and it was doing like Legion artifact damage, and everyone was like, "Whoa, this is the best thing ever!" And then like 2 hours later, when they implemented it correctly, they gave it like the whole shebang. Like they put a cooldown on it, they increased the fury cost on it, they target capped it, like everything you can think of that would make something like they put it on it. So like, but yeah, I guess it competes with Trail of Ruin because of the target cap issue there, but Unbound is like reigning supreme there.
You can't be too surprised though, right? Like it was a lot of fun, so it had to get the
Well,
old.
It was kind
That's
of
the thing.
really broken.
It was
Can't
broken.
remember.
It was very broken.
I was obviously expecting them to do something about it, but I was expecting them to do maybe 2 out of the 3 things, not all 3 things. I was either expecting them to like do 2 of the 3 of like increase fury, put a cooldown on it, and target cap it. Only put 2 of the 3 there, and it would be a way more interesting talent.
Okay.
But everything's on there now.
I have one small question about Unbound Chaos. I played it when it mechanically hasn't changed since it first came out, like 2 months ago, maybe 3 months ago, something like that. Since it was redesigned, I suppose.
Well, it was an artifact trait in early Legion that they removed before the raid came out.
Right.
Before Old Raid came
BFA.
out. Yeah, sorry.
Do you guys like the fact that the image explodes like after X amount of travel, or would you like to see it frozen orb style where it explodes on impact with the first target? You know what I mean? Like you have to like skill shot it, so to speak, right now, as opposed to just launch it in the right direction.
Ideally, to me, it would just go on your target and just land on your target, wherever that is, because that could be nice. But another thing that could be nice to do it's just like have the same like demon dude just like fell rush just behind you.
Right.
At least that way would be consistent, because the biggest issue right now is that since it lands at the quote like end of your fell rush, and I mean I'm sure everyone that played Demon Hunter to any extent knows like sometimes you're gonna fell rush like 20 yards, sometimes you're gonna fell rush like 15 yards, and sometimes you're gonna fell rush like 10 yards.
Sometimes you're gonna DC.
Sometimes you're gonna DC, even though that's not really a thing anymore.
Thank God.
And I DC'd once fell rushing since Legion came out, so I don't really know what's going on there, but whatever.
Actually, I made a notepad tracking every single time I DC'd
Oh my
in
God.
Legion, and they did like a big change that I never saw a DC from Felrush ever since then. Like
Mhm.
actually, so they definitely did something good right there.
Okay.
It's really nice.
But yeah, that's the biggest like no about Unbound is that since it lands at the end of your fell rush, and the end of your fell rush is, dare I say, RNG. Like you can Titan Forge your 40-yard fell rush, or you can get like no socket on it and just do 10 yards, and your Unbound just like misses the pack. You know.
I, I suppose a bit of well, I haven't tried it in its like version 2, but do you guys remember when it first came out? It was like you put up a buff window and then you can get like 2-3 fell rushes in real quick.
Yes.
Yeah. See, it was annoying because you'd volt out a 1 and then you'd have to manually run out of the pack again to do your next
Yeah.
one. And it was really annoying because I would have liked to just fell rush like across the hitbox and just have the image hit right away kind of thing. So I guess that's where that question came from, but it's not as bad now since it's only your next one. What do you think about it, Avade? Do you like that skill shot kind of to it, or do you want to see that changed a bit?
I think the reality is that the way Kib said it should work is the way they could actually make it work. I think in an ideal world, it actually hits like halfway through your fell rush.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's kind of always how it's been. It's been like 75% of the way through, but your ping affects, if you have like really high MS, your Unbound actually hits sooner. So like I feel like there's almost no way that they can actually fix that based off the way Felrush is designed and the fact that it goes different distances because of your ping. So in an ideal world, like I said, it would be 50% of the way through, and that would be like the cool way of like always getting it to hit. But the reality is that it's not always going to work like that. So having it be like some sort of guaranteed, like some guy follows you, hits the mobs, or like you said, Frozen Orb hits the first target would probably be better. Although currently, I think they did something that made it a bit more consistent, and it seems to land very close to the end of your fell rush now, as opposed to before where it was like a little bit more inconsistent. So from my testing and yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was just gonna say like this week, like since last build, like last Wednesday, they did something to it. It's noticeable how more, what's the word, consistent it is.
Yeah. So I mean that could be enough, to be honest.
Okay.
And
Fair. We touched on this row a bit earlier, but the middle row, the 35 row, Soul Rending, which is now 5% leech, 25% leech during meta, Desperate Instincts, and Netherwalk, which, as you mentioned, GCD, 3 minute, etc. Any further notes on here, or is it just kind of like your survivability row? It's nice. It's nice for what it's worth, by the way. Like frequently, there's issues where these like non-DPS throughput rows, there seems to be a lot of mixing of irritating things. Like you have a utility talent and a survivability talent and a mobility talent. It seems at least they
like a range piece and good karma.
Yeah, exactly. It's nice to see at least that you have like a dedicated survivability row. So at least that's one good thing. But is there any notable here for you guys?
No, Desperate is still. I don't know about PvP because I don't really arena, but Desperate for PvE is still pretty much like a dead thing. And then Soul Rending is like quote unquote like better because you lost a lot of passive leech. And Netherwalk is just still Netherwalk. I don't really think the 2 to 3 minute change really changed that much to it.
Okay.
It's just, you don't really need to use like your fake immunity all that much anyway, so 2 to 3 minute doesn't really affect it too much.
I actually really like I like when classes have like a lot of utility rows, because those are actually the most fun rows to pick your talents in, because it has nothing to do with like how Simcraft outputs your answer. It's like whatever you want. So I really like this row. I think Desperate Instincts should be stronger. I think in PvP it's like fine. It seems to actually be very good in PvP even right now, but not necessarily required. I like that Soul Rending gives you leech and that you don't have baseline leech. I would actually think it should be a little bit higher, but maybe that would be too OP, and I'm just stupid for thinking that. And yeah, like Kib said, like Netherwalk being 3 minutes isn't like the biggest of deal. Netherwalk isn't like an actual immunity. It's just like a lot of damage going out.
Full
and you just
DR.
like mitigate all of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just don't take damage, but you're not immune to like.
Right. Like you can't
those
use
sort
it as we know, you can't use it as like a N'Zoth immunity, right?
Yeah,
For sanity
yeah.
kind of thing. Right.
It's like think of it as like bark skin, except it's just 100%.
Okay.
But that ability just absolutely should be taken off global. It's a reactionary like short window, and
True.
things like that shouldn't be on global. It's used for reactionary purposes a lot of the time, and it no longer can be used reactionary, or if it's
Yeah.
on global.
Fair. Yeah. I mean, and that goes hand in hand with a lot of defensive based, again, from the world of
Yes.
tanking, right? Like I mean, even like for vengeance, right? Fiery brand, demo shout for warrior. There's a ton of them, and I'm kind of just hoping that this first round of categorized GCD changes they did is kind of a leeway into more. Maybe next week or the week after we have like the defensive things that they've considered, and hopefully things like Netherwark are on them. But still a lot of work to be done there for the GCD thing. 40 row, Cycle of Hatred, First Blood, Essence Break. Avade.
I don't even want to talk about this.
But you have to. This is what we paid
It's-
for the pay-per-view.
It's just the worst row. I don't know. So the whole core problem that I've always been talking about is that Havoc lacks rotational abilities, and so First Blood is like, hey, a rotational ability. So it helps make the class feel better to have First Blood, and then when you don't have First Blood and you have to pick something else, it just feels awful. Like, how does Cycle of Hatred make up for rotational ability? It just doesn't. It's just I-Beam CDR. How does Essence Break kind of makes up for rotational abilities? Kind of, but it's just like very uninteresting. Like I'll use Colossus Smash as an example. It may
Sure.
not be the best example, but it kind of is like that. You can Colossus Smash and then do your burst as a warrior, spend all your rage, and maybe execute a target with Colossal Smash with sweeping strikes up onto a mob. That's like interesting. Essence Break isn't really like that. It's just like a pull before you use it and then spend during it. Doesn't I don't know. That's pretty much all I have to say about it. It's a really bad row. I think it would be better if there were more rotational abilities. Maybe take First Blood and make it baseline, even though I don't think that's the 100% best solution. I think it would help. Or put other rotational abilities like Bloodlet on the same row as it. So like get rid of Cycle of Hatred, put Bloodlet there. Now you have like two rotational abilities competing against each other. And so when you lose one, you don't actually lose much, you gain something else. And so it doesn't feel as bad. That's just my opinion.
So what am I, sorry, dumb question here. What am I missing about First Blood that you guys keep saying it's a rotational ability? Like it doesn't seem to add anything.
If you basically Blade Dance is a garbage spell, and if you
Okay.
don't pick First Blood, you don't use Blade Dance under 3 targets.
Oh, really? Okay, so it makes it a always prio button.
It
kind of
makes it worth using on single target.
Okay. That makes sense.
It's your most
Okay.
efficient single target ability.
So
and AoE
basically, like that also pairs into like why Essence Break is kind of flawed as a talent as well, because it's like in BFA it was like called Dark Slash, and it would only buff your Chaos Strike, but since it's competing with First Blood, you don't press Blade Dance while Essence Break is up, regardless, because you don't have First Blood. So it's basically Dark Slash with more text added onto the tooltip.
So very favorable row here.
Yes, like the most favorable row of all the rows.
So what do you,
that's the row that needs the most work, if anything, for sure.
so what are your guys' approach to it? You mentioned like put First Blood baseline and Bloodlet in its place.
No. Well, what I was saying about Bloodlet was have Bloodlet be replacing one of the two next to First Blood,
Okay, yep.
or just maybe don't have Bloodlet at all, although I think Bloodlet would be amazing. Take First Blood off of that row, make Blade Dance a rotational single target ability, and then put something else there instead of First Blood.
Okay.
So either of those two things, I'm sure a lot of people would be happy with. Basically, think of it this way: it's like the utility row, like you said, where you have like Ring of Peace and Good Karma on the same row. It's the same thing here. You have like a rotational ability, and then like two kind of like how the way your class plays sort of abilities.
Yeah,
So it's like
I got you.
really odd. It's like if you had, I don't know, Can't think of a good example.
It's not a proper thematic row, is what you're saying.
Yes,
You're forced
exactly.
into one or the other based on what you want to do. There's no real choice here. What do you think, Kib? Did you agree with Avade's kind of?
Yeah, I agree with everything he said, but if I were to redesign this row, I would go further than that. I would literally delete the whole row and start from scratch.
I mean, I'd be down with that as well. Yep.
And starting from scratch there, like the change I would do is I would delete First Blood from the game, but I would bake in the Fury reduction from Blade Dance baseline, only the Fury reduction, so that the spell can be used single target. And then I would make Essence Break baseline as well, and then make that whole talent row affect Essence Break. That's it. I'd have one talent that gives Essence Break 2 charges. I'd have one talent that makes Essence Break do more like AoE type thing, and I have one talent that would make Essence Break more single target type thing.
Okay.
That's it.
Careful with those 2 charges. Those are always
well, those are the
hard to
most
compete
interesting
against.
buttons to press,
That's
in
right.
my opinion.
That's right.
Because the 2 charges would synergize well with momentum, because each momentum window you could press 1 charge, and then the 2 other buttons that would be bigger buffs but for just single target or just AoE could synergize well with demonic, because while you're in demonic you get the meta effect, which makes your Chaos Strike and your Blade Dance change to the other spell that do like 30% more damage, right? So you could synergize the demonic thing that buffs your baseline spell with bigger amps into the Essence Break window, or you could play momentum and get the 2 charge with which you could weave 1 charge in each windows.
Okay.
Also, any spell that has 2 charges is automatically gives you more depth to the class, because it's no longer just press the button on cooldown. It's now, okay, now I have this extra charge that I can use however I want.
Yep.
Do I want to use it back to back? Do I?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. That's why I said be careful with it, because often it's like it's so good that it ends up being cookie cutter anyways, right? Like it adds so much option.
But that would still be better than First Blood versus Cycle and Essence Break.
It seems like
I'd be happier
better.
living in a world with 2 Essence Break charge than the First Blood row.
Right. Okay. Point taken. 40 row sucks ass. 45. Unleashed Power, Master of the Glaive, Fell Eruption. Looks like your utility-ish row / CC-ish row.
Again, another row that I like because it's utility and you get to pick whatever you want on it because you're not locked into whatever.
Wait, did you say you don't
Sims the best? No, I do like.
Oh,
it.
I'm sorry. Okay, I misheard.
I love all utility rows like this because you actually get to pick what you want. You're not like locked into whatever Sims the best or whatever. How do you feel about that?
I mean, without Fell Bombardment, I agree. With Fell Bombardment, you're kind of locked into a Master of the Glaive.
Well, okay, so I was just about to say something. I was gonna say I think that the 2 charges of Throw Glaive should be kind of baseline because even if it was baseline right now, it wouldn't even matter because you don't use Throw Glaive on cooldown. It would just like make the things that you want to use Throw Glaive with work, and then you could maybe tie in, instead of just Throw Glaive slowing your target, maybe Blade Dance and then maybe reduce the slow or something like that. You could do anything with that talent just to give you some sort of slow. The only thing I don't like is that you actually don't have a slow at all in PvP. I know people don't care about PvP, but you almost always want Fell Eruption to stun in PvP, and then you just lose your slow. It just feels awful trying to like keep up with a class that's like just not slowed at all. So you just DK or DKDH becomes very popular because having a slow on your teammate becomes like incredibly valuable. But I think the row is like good. I think Fell Eruption is probably just a little too good versus those other ones. Maybe they should just give Unleash Power a little bit of love, and then again make 2 charges of Throw Glaive baseline, and then maybe add something a little bit more interesting on that talent. Otherwise, I think the talent row is like fine. Nothing really to complain about it.
All right. And I think we're probably going to get some heat here again, right? But 50 row. Demonic, Momentum, Fell Barrage. I already see Kib smirking.
Well, I mean,
oh, no.
we went on Momentum already for a while, so, it's coming back. But yeah, I mean, Fel Barrage just like I don't know what Fel Barrage is doing there. Like, it's like cool they added Glaive Tempest and then they just moved Fel Barrage to that old like Nemesis spot, and it's like, well, okay, well, we'll never pick Fel Barrage. Might as well like put an NYI in that slot because you know they'll need to buff Fel Barrage massively for it to compete with the other two options. And by massively, it's like massively, like. It, but and then the other two, like we already went on them about for a little bit. So
But for Shadowlands,
yep.
what is looking like is the go to in your guys' opinions, or is there legit room for both? It depends on your play style. Like obviously, there's just gonna be some numbers here at the end of the day
Hmm.
for you two guys. What do you think? In momentum, demonic, how's it looking right now?
It's from my personal testing because I haven't really like. I mean, people are working on Simcraft in the back, but not really like I haven't really like played with it much yet. But from my testing, momentum and demonic are pretty close to each other. But the fact that demonic is like infinitely simpler to play will basically make it like a default pick, right?
But do you get if you played momentum high level, etc. Like Avade, what do you think? If you played momentum high level, would those numbers like would the result be worth it, or do you have to play momentum at a really good skill level to even match demonic kind of thing?
I don't think the skill level matters that much, and it mainly goes back to what I was saying earlier about there being like so few burst damage abilities and how like the damage window for momentum is so large that it's practically not that it's not as like skillful as it may seem because there's even a legendary that reduces Falrish's cooldown to 7 seconds, so you can
Yeah.
have a 6 second momentum buff every 7 seconds. So it's like you can kind of just say it's about 100% uptime. It's very hard to fuck that up. So at that point, you're just comparing demonic to like something that's just giving you like a flat 15% damage increase. Uh, and so all of the like thoughts of oh, is this going to be worth it based off the skill isn't really like a thing. It's just based off the design of the class, not really favoring momentum. If
Okay.
momentum as it is right now compares to demonic, even if it's slightly better, you're always going to want to play demonic. It's just because momentum just functionally doesn't work very well right now.
And and I guess demonic has maybe some defensive value attached to it as well, right?
Yeah, for sure. Especially when you take soul running.
Yeah, which is a consideration. So,
Yeah.
um, okay, so we kind of picked this tree apart. In I guess summary, is there anything? Is there anything else you want to add to it? Because we kind of talked about what, in your opinion, should be baseline, what needs to get completely redesigned, numbers, tuning, etc. Is there anything else you want to add to it, or?
Uh, Bring Bloodlet back, I guess, is the big one. And
Yep.
don't just bring Bloodlet back. Bring Bloodlet back with the legendary bracer effect onto it too. Just go all in.
Well, I mean, if they didn't want to add the effect to it, they could add it somewhere else if they wanted to, like a legendary, and
Like a
or just
legendary. Ooh.
or just I don't know anything. Oh yeah, like a legendary. I'd like to say that Felbarage being on that talent row is like he's like Kib said, very awkward.
Okay.
If they actually reverted that Felbarage back to the Legion version, it would just it would actually be it would feel awful because Bell Barrage plus momentum in Legion felt like so like amazing to use, and then having them on the same tree would be like, ha ha, you can't have them both together. And also, I don't think having Fell Barrage there in its old form, or even in its new form, would even give that sort of gameplay altering style that the other two options provide. I don't think it deserves to be on that row.
Would
I
you want
don't think Felbarados deserves to be deleted just because it's on that row, but I just think something else needs to be there.
just like something completely new? Use
I
creative
mean,
brains.
Well, they could literally do something as simple as like baking Trail of Ruin into like whatever Blade Dance talent they have, which right now is First Blood, and move Fel Barrage back to its row where it was before.
Okay.
there's a lot of baking in like that they could
And-
do. Like
Oh, yeah.
Blind Fury is so synergistic with demonic that it's like,
Yeah.
you know, if they bake that in, which won't, and I'm not even saying they should, it would, you know, work really well. Really well. My idea before they removed Nemesis was actually to redesign Nemesis and make it like less brain dead. You know, give it 2 charges and have it be half duration. Have it when the mob dies, it's not based off the mob type, which, by the way, Blizzard doesn't design mob types around Nemesis. Nemesis is just unfortunately affected by it. It increases all damage to mobs instead of just, you know, that one type. Just get rid of that whole mechanic. But yeah, I mean that's basically it.
You know, beyond like of all the shows we've had so far, all the different community reps have been fairly responsible and objective about, you know, what should be added baseline and what shouldn't and how to improve talents. You guys by far take the cake with the amount of things that are like this should be baseline or added.
I mean, open your
but hang on a second.
Open your spell.
It's not exactly though. This is what I'm saying. It's not a bad thing, but I just want to bring this back to what we were saying earlier that it seems to definitely, as Avade you said as well, be like Blizzard intent, right? To have this be simplistic, and have guys like you that are more experienced with the spec, vets, high-end gameplay, etc., desire so many of these things to be baseline, and Blizzard just not budging because they want, I guess, that simplistic model on it, right?
Yeah, I think if you ask Blizzard right now in BFA, like, what do you think is the like most successful class they had? I almost guarantee you they would say Demon Hunter, and so like that obviously, you know, makes me feel bad, but on the other end, there's probably a lot of people that are happy
Not
because they like
Windwalker.
Demon Hunter.
Huh.
Not Windwalker. Definitely not that.
Yeah, fair. No, it was just an observation. It wasn't like a dig or a positive thing. It was just, if anything, it just further confirms that they definitely seem to want it that way. Baseline to not be intimidating for newer players, etc. As whatever, maybe a selling point or an intro to melee. Who knows? One topic, one SL system change that I usually ask before we do the talent thing, but I wanted to wait until the talent thing because I know you guys would comment on it. There's 2 major plagues in, I'd say especially the world of everybody. Let's say everybody. AOE cap and GCD. Now GCD is, you know, we got a big W recently, and hopefully we keep going in that direction. But let's tackle these real quick because the AOE cap is certainly something that has slapped Havoc a fair bit in some areas. I think I-Beam, right? Soft cap now diminishes beyond your primary.
Yeah.
Fell Barrage just got buffed from 5 to 8. Is Blade Dance 5 on live, or is that new as well?
Yeah. No, it's new.
That's new as well. Glaive Templates just got smacked with it. Trail of Ruin, etc. So, thoughts? Probably not positive thoughts, but, and you know, just to put it into context, right? Just so we're having like at least somewhat of an educated discussion about this. The goal of all this AOE capping from Blizzard's perspective is to try and create, try to recreate, because these used to exist a long time ago in Warcraft, niches, right? Like DPS niches, DPS damage profiles, so that, you know, there's people who specialize in single target, you know, cleave up to 5 target, cleave up to 8, and then obviously uncapped AoE. So this is kind of the direction they're trying to take things in. And Havoc seems to be definitely one of the main prototypes, capping a lot of things that iconically weren't for you guys. So what's your brain at about that?
I mean,
I think go for it.
I don't want to say I agree with the capping, but I understand it in some aspect. When, like, say you have an ability that, you know, you have baseline, and the baseline ability that does AoE on, like, with no cooldown or whatever, you know, and they put a cap on that, I kind of get it. But then the issue is that every button that Havoc presses is basically a talent. So when you put an AoE cap on all of our talent, it basically caps everything that we do. So we have the only uncapped thing we have is basically Unbound. And like,
and I-Beam technically,
but
it's soft cap, right?
Like I mean, you hit like 6 targets with it, and it does like 10 damage on everything beside the main targets.
Mm-hmm.
not really interesting, but yeah.
I mean, well, Evade, what do you think first?
I don't like target capping because, like First Blood, it's not very clear which target is always going to be the one that gets hit. You know, especially with Layden's last hit being the majority of the damage. If you're AoEing 10 mobs, you can't decide which 5 are going to get hit by the last one, even though you would ideally want to. That's what I find inherently bad about target capping. But like, you know, Throw Glaive is target capped and always has been. And I think that that's fine because it makes sense. Same thing with like Chain Lightning for Elemental Shaman. I feel like design-wise, something like Chain Lightning and something like Throw Glaive, like those kind of target capping makes sense from the way that the class like works. You know, when you think of Chain Lightning, it can chain infinitely, but you know, capping it and it's being capped from the beginning, as far as I'm concerned about Elemental Shaman, feels good and feels fine, and nobody complains about it. But I feel like it's just like a design cop out to just be like, all right, like it would be kind of hard to like go over every single spec and change everything and change how things work to make it feel good like Chain Lightning. So we're just gonna slap target caps on people and like hope that they like it. I feel like, and I don't know. I prefer how iBeam works in terms of target capping. I like that it at least doesn't feel like it's doing less damage, or you're not hitting every target. Because like when you're hitting iBeam, you know you see the animation, you expect it to hit every target. Doesn't feel the same with like Blade Dance. Doesn't feel the same with Glaive Tempest. This doesn't feel the same with Fel Barrage, certainly. So I think it just, I think the hard cap is the biggest problem I have. The idea behind it, I'm for, but I think the implementation is just like, unfortunately, not very good.
So even if they were able to achieve the balance that they hope for, to have, let's say, Demon Hunter be a bigger specialist in 5 mob cleave and, you know, fall off a bit after that, just conceptually and mechanically, it's not something you guys like, period. Because no matter how much more damage you might do in a 5-man group, it just feels crappy that you can't prioritize the targets you want when it's 6+.
Well, conveniently, if we're talking about just Havoc, Havoc has a 3-target cleave ability that they could have, you know, made Demon Hunter specialize in. You know, if you want Demon Hunter to specialize in some sort of cleave, make them specialize in 3-target cleave with Bloodlet and the Throw Glaive Bracer legendary effect. You've now achieved what you wanted and didn't change anything about the spec negatively and made anybody feel like they're hitting mobs less. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I got you.
So I feel like that's a missed opportunity for sure.
I think one of the biggest feedbacks that I've heard about this throughout, well, just everywhere, like community shows, whatever, is that there's seemingly, from an outside perspective at least, very little logic or very little feedback given on which spell and why, right? It seems they kind of just dartboarded it and we're like, okay, well, yeah, Fel Barrage is 5 and so on. So it seems like there wasn't really, outside of the idea that we want to implement this potential niche, there wasn't really extended thought beyond that. Kib, what do you think?
I agree. I mean, that's how it hit everyone when it was first announced. Like, you just saw the word like AoE cap, and obviously everyone recoiled instantly. And then after everyone played with it for a little bit, like you kind of understand like what they were kind of targeting after playing with it for a little bit. Like it's not really a something that's going to affect raid that much. Like there's very rarely bosses that have like massive AoE into them, so it's
except that one boss.
Yeah, except that one boss, but
but he's not wrong. Like it's rare, right? It's not like you right. Yeah, like we obviously have one.
It's obviously something that's mostly targeted at like Mythic Plus, and they probably didn't really like you know, the giant MDI pulls that people were doing, so they came up with that solution. But it obviously needs more thought, more time put into it to obviously perfect it. But yeah.
But I don't.
That's basically my opinion of it.
I mean, Evade, you play a ton of M Plus as well. I don't really think that's going to prevent people from doing that in M Plus, right? It'll do one of two things. It'll either people still do it anyways, and just bring classes that can, and then it could even start to hurt more of this, you know, meta community concept of like, sorry bro, you can't come to our you know, our M plus because you can only hit 5 targets kind of thing. What do you think of it?
I think that absolutely will happen. And I mean, if you've pulled like, for example, the other side, you go to the left side of the dungeon. There's like a massive AOE fest area.
Yep.
And there's like a typical big pull that people do. You can just see on the meters like who's target capped and who's not, and it's kind of funny but also sad. I don't think that kind of pull is like often, so I don't think the target cap is like, it's not always in effect negatively affecting you, but it is noticeable when it's there. And just to be clear, I don't think Demon Hunter is actually that negatively impacted by the target cap because of Unbound Chaos existing. Maybe I shouldn't have said that. But it helps give them
This is going on the record. Fair. Somebody in chat just said, first the left side, then the other side. I hate you for saying that. I hear you. I think to a certain extent, this is one of those things that I don't know if you guys agree, and not that this is something to be like, oh yeah, you're right, Salute, like let's just not argue about it anymore. But I have a feeling it's one of those things that the majority of people really aren't going to notice or care about, because you're not having 20 plus pulls in a lot of these dungeons and raids, like Kib mentioned, most of the time. This is not a thing. Like, do you guys think that's true, or is it something that once the public gets their hands on, it's going to be like mass outrage for the people that haven't seen or tried beta?
That's definitely true, but at the same time, if they're not going to care, why'd you do it? I mean, are people really doing MDI pulls in their weekly 15s or like 20s? Like, nobody's actually doing that. It's just in the MDI.
Right.
So it's kind of weird that like anybody would use the reasoning of MDI. I don't really believe in that. I don't even think Blizzard believes in that. But I mean, I'm sure people are doing MDI pulls at 15s, but not everybody.
Yeah, I'm not like, I don't think the majority of the player base is doing MDI pulls, but I mean, you can see the MDI comps being reflected in what people are asking for in LFG and whatnot. So that,
True.
like, to me, I just assume that the people that are looking for MDI type comps for their dungeon groups, for their weekly 15 or whatever, will try as well to replicate the run from the MDI, because, you know, why copy one thing? Like, you just copy the whole thing if you're going to copy one thing, right? That
Well,
just
if you
seems
mean
logical.
comp, then if you mean their comp, then yes. I don't think anybody's copying their actual strategies, because there's zero chance that would ever work in a bug.
Yeah, I don't know. I only do keys with like guildies and people that I know, so I don't really have to interact with any of that. So it doesn't really affect me that much from like a group finding type of thing. But as Sloot said, I don't think it will affect as much as people expected it to. And I expect this to be similar to like the GCD type stuff, like when BFA came out and a bunch more things got added to the GCD. Like, it was like this big buzzing thing and everyone was like outraged about the GCD, and then as the expansion went on, it kind of like died out and nobody really talked about it anymore until the next expansion when it came back. And you know, it's just going to be like right now there's this cycle of like uncapped AoE versus capped AoE, because people aren't really playing the beta, or they don't have it, and they're just like basing their views from what they see on streams and what they hear people or see on Twitter and whatnot. And when they'll actually play it, it's just going to be a thing. It's like, well, this is their reality now, so let's just deal with it, right?
Yeah, fair. For what it's worth, I never forgot about the GCD thing. I've hated it so much, especially in the world of tanking.
Well, yeah,
but I get what you're saying.
It's not like the main thing of the, yeah.
I do think there's kind of this ongoing, like, you know, it's hard not to compare some of these kind of major hot topics, and we don't have to dive into them right now. We'll be here all night otherwise. But, you know, things like Covenant choice and the Conduit one's a bit of a separate issue. But let's say like AoE, GCD cap, Covenant choice stuff. You know, it's interesting what you guys said, because I agree with, right, the easy counter argument to people being like, this is awful, is that there's probably a large enough handful of players that just don't care about it, right? That maybe want it, that think it's kind of neat, whatever. But the level of impact that it has on these players, that these things exist, is much smaller than the level of impact it has on the players that really don't want it. Like, you guys know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So like the AoE cap is for sure. Some people are like, oh yeah, it's not a big deal, I don't really care. You know, we'll do it like our pulls, or we'll do our weekly key. But for the guys that it does impact, it's super disruptive. And it kind of begs the question, like, I agree with you guys, like, what's the point, right? It doesn't really fully convenience anyone. Rather, it detriments a smaller population, it seems. But I don't know. But since you mentioned it, good segue into the GCD stuff. Is Havoc really even a class that is heavily, like, offended by GCD stuff?
Not
Nope.
really. The only thing we really have is meta, and that's a Formnet cooldown, and then the rest is just you'd expect GCDs on these things. The only thing, like Avade mentioned earlier, is like Netherwalk is the big one, and I like,
And
you know,
darkness,
yeah,
but
Oh,
that's
that's
about
annoying.
it.
Darkness, along with like every other like rate cooldown ability, like should at least be put on like a half GCD type thing, and like some reactionary spells, like Netherwalk. Like, if I want to use Netherwalk to take no damage because the ability is coming, I've already made the decision that I want to press Netherwalk. I don't need to wait until my next GCD to press it.
You're
That's how I see it, at least.
you're a fellow tank in training. The amount of times tanks have died to trying to heal themselves, but they can't because it's on the GCD and they've already made the
Right. Yeah, it's
skillful.
the same principle.
It is awful.
It's like, obviously Sinful Brand needs to be on the GCD and whatnot, but like, yeah, you make a decision and you can't act on it. Like, what's up?
Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, hopefully this is just a category that they address. But nonetheless, in terms of major offender, right? You know, well, not actually arcane mages anymore, but unholy DKs now, ret paladins. Ironically, you guys aren't part of the whole like queue up 7 GCDs before you can actually do anything. I think that's probably one of the attractive qualities about the spec to a lot of players, is that it's very mobile, not in the literal sense. Well, I mean, also in the literal sense, but it's very just kind of free and open, right? It's very easy for you to just hop on a pack in M plus and get going right away, rather than queuing up a million different things. Evade.
Yeah, I mean, you press your I beam and you're in meta form and you're ready to go. A very very appealing thing to people.
All right, let's get back into SL deep dive then. Let's talk about covenants. Not soulbinds and conduits. We'll get to that in a bit, and legendaries and all that, but just the covenant abilities themselves. Obviously, the usual stuff. It's still a bit too early to tell. It could just be in one patch that one of them gets massively numerically buffed, and then you take, you know, what SimC says. But more so mechanically speaking, what do you guys think, and where are we looking? For what I've seen, for the majority of the time, like, I guess Venthyr OP, Venthyr is the way to go. Is it just that much miles ahead of the other 3? Do any of them have like a chance to catch up? What are you guys thinking?
I think in terms of sims, they're pretty close, right?
They're they're closer than they look like in player data, if that makes sense. Like, when I play, like the Ventier one just like destroys all the other one, but for some reason in Sims they're like, well, I mean, I say they're close, but like 800 damage difference when the Sim does 3k damage is not that close either. So I guess, yeah.
I need to step away for 1 second.
Okay.
Yeah. So they're a couple percent off, but a couple percent too much that they become like a consideration of like which one you pick, basically.
Have you played
So
with?
Ventier's
Sorry, go
the
ahead.
default.
Have you played around with the hunt? I keep saying that with a C usually, but the hunt redesign. Have you played around with that at all? What do you think? It's busted right now, right? Like, the self healing doesn't work. At least it didn't on
Yeah.
Vengeance.
Yeah, but I have not played with that yet. I wanted to play with it this weekend, but I still have my weak aura that tells me I'm an idiot whenever I use the hunt, so I don't think I'll have to change that.
Okay. What do you mean? Why? Why are you an idiot? Oh, just for having it? Or?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I played with it on Vengeance a bit. It was, the self healing didn't work for starters, which is one of the
Yeah.
big selling points, and the damage was super underwhelming. And even though it's a second, having like a quick cast time on an otherwise very quick spammy melee is a bit
Hmm.
just weird. I don't know. I hate.
Yeah, that would be one that shouldn't be on the GCD, like as like a just a feel type thing.
Yeah,
Like it doesn't make sense that it's on GCD.
there's a lot of these covenant abilities for melee, especially I want to say, that are because a lot of melee are quicker paced, sometimes
Hmm.
higher APM, and there's a few of them that just have this like cast time, and it's so weird.
Yep.
Like Ashen Hallow and like enhancement, a bunch of them, and this one too is just I don't know. I hope they reconsider that, but I guess that's just a byproduct of having the covenants be class-wide things rather than spec. Although it's not like there's a range spec or a
Yeah,
healing
but
spec.
for DH it
Yeah,
shouldn't really
exactly.
matter
No,
because both specs are melee, so it affects them
very true.
equally. But like for Druid, like yeah, I get like a Feral and a Boomkin are gonna have different perspectives.
But again, like you talked about SimC with the numbers, but do you think there's any mechanical advantage to the other ones? So like the sigil for Kyrian, or the summon a demon and put your little zone down.
The
Like, do you see any
the
niche
only
uses?
one the only one that has like some sort of like cool interaction is the Maldraxxus one,
Okay.
the demon dude.
Hmm.
Because you can basically summon your demon and you imprison it right away, and you hope that no one in your raid will kill it because for some reason everyone in the group can see it,
Oh,
not just
it's
you.
not a personal thing.
Well, I
I
assume
think they
that's a
changed
bug,
that.
Oh, you're
but
back. Okay, I didn't know when you
Yeah,
were
I
back.
saw.
yeah, I don't know if they changed it yet, but I assume they're gonna change it. But the last time I tried it out, that's how it worked. Everyone in the group could see it, so they would just like, there's a guy there, I'm gonna kill it,
Dude, that's awful.
and
Because
so, but yeah, the cool thing with it is basically you summon your guy, you imprison it, and then when you summon your next guy, then you can kill the first one, get the demon soul from it, and get like the buff for it
mhm.
because you killed a demon. And then, but then you have two guys that you kill, so you can chain your demon soul for the whole duration of your metamorphosis. That's like the cool thing to do with
do
it.
do you think there's any practical use to ever using that evade in like actual content, or is it just like an on paper that's neat, but mechanically it'll never actually be feasible for most?
Yeah, I think that's pretty much the case. On paper, it would work. In theory, it wouldn't. Although
Yep.
maybe in like very tight, mo- fights where you don't move that much and it's like single target and there's not much going on, it could be. But
Okay.
yeah, I think that whole covenant should be completely redesigned. But I do like the demon soul mechanic. I think that
Hmm.
because there hasn't been any demons in any raid in all of BFA in any dungeon. Zero demons. I haven't seen a demon soul since Legion, which was really fun to try and get the killing blow on like a demon. So just adding back, your ability to play around demon souls, that could be something that they play off of for Necrolord. It doesn't have to be summon a demon. I feel like that's just like a cool idea that you think of and then you don't actually do it, but then they actually did it. Um, maybe if it was just rip a demon soul from a target, maybe that's a little too boring. But I mean, so is Sinful Brand. So
um I mean, like, if it's all about demon souls, you could just wait for the PS5 and they're remaking it. I have to do it. You said it so many times, dude. Fair. It's one of those flavor things, I guess, at this point, right? That like used to be part of practical gameplay, but just no longer is, and maybe needs a more modernized update, for lack of a better term.
yeah, I mean, it also puts a circle on the ground that restricts your movement as a high mobility class. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, I'm always wary, if anything, that this is coming from a tank dude. I'm always very wary about things that you have to stand in that immediately get yoinked out of zones because so many mobs put crap on the ground. Not that it's
Yeah.
even easy to see things on the ground these days with all the night fae effects, but point taken. Let's start to get into the Soulbind and Conduit portion of things here. For Soulbinds, we don't usually spend too much time talking about them for a couple of reasons. One is there's not really too much to talk about. It's often just oh, there's this 1 or 2 OP thing, like, unless that gets changed. And the other thing is Blizzard constantly does change these. But that being said, before we dive into conduits, is there anything notable about any of the 12 Soulbinds or any of the Soulbind abilities within their tree that's, you know, like, oh, you have to take this, like, hands down kind of thing, Kib?
Trail Seeker is pretty good, and on Ventier, Naja, her name is, I think. Yeah.
Her ultimate ability.
Yes, that you'll have like 4 months after the expansion comes out. But yeah, that thing's pretty good. Well, very, very good. But also on that same tree, you have the extracting preparation on the left side, the like poisony looking icon that makes your pot, your well fed, your flask, and your weapon enchant do a lot more. So that's pretty cool, since you know, lightless is hasted RPPM, and
It's so busted for dual wielding.
Exactly.
It's obscene.
yeah, and then again on the same tree, there's the Dauntless Duelist that is you know, for pure single target instances, it's flat 4% damage, so that's pretty good.
All right.
But apart from those, like, they're all like just things, you know, like
Even the other covenants, like nothing notable for Night Fae, Necrolord, Kyrian, no?
not well. There's that Night Fae one that's super busted right now, but obviously that's not how it's supposed to work.
Are you talking about the haste thing?
Yeah,
I think they just hotfixed it, if I'm not mistaken.
because Havoc loves haste, obviously. So anything that gives haste is good. So
What kind of stat prio are you guys looking at for Shadowlands? Primarily haste, obviously, as you've said, and haste verse.
because there's nothing.
Because there's
else.
nothing else that's better.
Okay, well, at least you'll be geared for tanking as well now.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Okay, so then let's get into the conduits. Usually, obviously, the main focus is potency, because that's, at least from a DPS perspective, that's the main kind of bread and butter, and makes and breaks a lot of things. But I am curious if there's any notables within your finesse, like the utility-based ones, or the endurance, more of like the defensive ones. For instance, last week when Warriors were here, they actually had some really cool and good conduits in those. By comparison, their potency ones were garbage. But do you guys have anything notable, Avade in the finesse or endurance category, that maybe changes things a bit, even helps the group a fair bit, or is it just kind of whatever?
Well, there's the one that makes your demonic wards like much stronger. So just passively, you take 8%, or it goes from 10% to 18% reduced damage. That's pretty much. I mean, there's a lot of good ones. I mean, the Blur CDR one's really good, but there's nothing like that's super special that like affects your group really.
Is so the demonic wards one is additive, right? Just 10 plus 8. Okay,
I believe so.
that's pretty big.
Yeah, it's very, very big. The endurance ones are very, very good for, like, you know, being tanky. Like, you get the demonic wards and the blur one like at rank 15, and there you have your dampening character for PvP.
Oh god.
Yeah, but I would rather them not tie so much defensive power into the conduits rather than just having them at baseline, having the conduits be a little bit less as effective, especially with demonic wards. But you know, what can you do about that?
Yeah, that Viscous Ink one is big for Vengeance as well. Any notables for finesse, like the more utility-y based ones? Consume magic.
They're very PvP oriented.
Yeah, true. Actually, that is true.
Well, the imprison one that puts a snare on the target at the end, the snare puts the target in combat. So if you imprison a target in like M+ to skip, when the imprison fades, the guy just starts running after you.
Good thing I never would pick that one anyway.
I'm just gonna assume oversight here, but you never know.
Yeah, I assume so too. Has been reported, but you know, it's still a thing. So I just wanted to make sure to bring it up.
Fair, yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to think in like M+, well, both of you, not just Evade, but in the world of M+, well, certainly not as much rating, but in the world of M+, I can't even think of many mobs in these dungeons that have like multiple magic effects where consume magic will have a chance to, you know, consume something really important. Yeah.
On top of the fact that it's super RNG, like even at rank 15, it says 30% chance. Like you're never going to reliably do that. It's just going to be like a oh, that's kind of nice. If
Well, I mean, beside your normal Purge and Arcane Torrent, because there's only one race for a Demon Hunter.
true, unless you're Alliance.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
but
not,
come on, man. Who is?
only one race for Demon
Well,
Hunter.
I suppose
I
you
think
guys
in-
will be for a bit for dwarves,
So,
and that's about
yeah,
it. but
maybe.
maybe wink, wink.
Kyrian DH for Annihilota? Not Natria, is that what I heard?
Fellfire Haste is actually kind of cool though. Like I like having movement speed after you use a mobility. It seems kind of nice.
It's for a while.
That's
too, isn't it?
definitely your,
It's like
your
it's for like 8 seconds or something too, right? Like it's not like a crappy little 2-second buff.
yeah. So I think for PvE, you're probably that's like if you have to pick a finesse, it's always going to be that, and then Ravenous, and then if that thing still bugged you, you'll go for Lost in Darkness, which is like worthless. So. Except in like I don't know, halls of not halls, spires of Ascension.
Yeah, those damn cats.
If you like, make a mistake and body pull so that I don't know, it's ridiculous. It's very nice for PvP though, but nobody cares about that apparently.
All right, let's get into the bread and butter of the potency ones then. Any standouts? Well, I mean, we'll go through all of them anyway. There's not many, right? There's 4 overall, including a communal. But not just the innate Havoc ones, but also their Covenant-based ones. Kib, why don't you start us off?
Well, all the Covenant-based ones are like pretty weak.
Okay.
That's the theme for everything about in that page for Havoc. Everything is like kind of eh. The 1 second off of like Sinful at like rank 1 and 15, I think, at max rank is I mean, Sinful does a lot of damage, but it's just like uninteresting. It's just I just press my button a little bit more often.
I'm gonna assume that demonic for like you guys can't spread like Vengeance, you can't spread Sinful without actual meta use, right?
Yes,
Okay.
it's meta itself.
That'll be super busted then, I suppose. But
yeah.
All right.
Yeah, so that one is just like whatever. Then Growing Inferno is really, really good. Surprisingly, it makes like, well, not surprisingly, but you don't really think of Emo as like a high damage ability, but in keys it does a lot of damage because of that trait.
Yeah, it's big for Vengeance as well.
Yeah, I assume for Vengeance too. I haven't really tanked that much yet in Shadowlands. What is there as threat? Serrated Glaives. I mean, it gives you a reason to use Throglaive, but like you don't want to because it's so like bad. But it synergizes well with Fell Bombardment, the legendary that I'm sure we'll talk about in a little bit as well. So having Fell Bombardment and Serrated Glaive can let you like spread that debuff on like a lot of targets. So it helps your high beam.
That feels very good, but like assuming that you're not playing that Conduit kind of seems like annoying. It's just like, oh, I want to I-beam right now, but I have to spend a global beforehand. Whereas we were talking earlier, Sloot, about how some other classes have to like do stuff before they can start doing damage.
Right.
This would kind of do that. You have to throw glaive before you can start I-beaming, and it's kind of annoying, but with Fell Bombardment, it's actually kind of interesting.
I mean, like, mini hot take for a second. Doesn't this at least add some kind of fun and depth, albeit small? To it adds like some interaction to something at least, right?
Yeah.
Very, very small, but I'll always welcome something for sure.
Okay.
It's not nothing like the other ones that we looked at previously. That, you just put them in and that's it. At least there's something there, and there's some synergy with a legendary, which is added benefit.
Okay. So
next.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, I was just gonna say next. But...
Dancing with Fate. That one is very good. Although at rank 1 it's only 5%, but when it ranks up, like it's very, very good. Obviously, like it's straight up the talent essence break that you apply on your target.
Yep.
So it's just super, super good. It's a little bit annoying in like Mythic Plus, because you're gonna need like a very good like weak aura or like a plater script. What I do for mine is I just have my nameplate changed to like being like bright blue color when they have the debuff on them, because it applies from your blade dance, and your blade dance is going to hit 5 targets. So you don't know which one of these 5 targets will get the debuff applied to them if it applies.
It's a
So you need
mystery.
a good way to like see it really quickly to be able to target swap, because it makes your chaos strike do 40% more damage. So it's very impactful. But
Also,
all-
every tick applies it as well.
yeah.
Oh, so you have, how many ticks are there? 3?
4.
4. So you have a 4 times baseline percent chance for each.
Yeah.
Okay. And
So
does each tick change, like, can each tick hit new targets, or is it locked to the first 5 targets you tag?
I think each tick can choose a different target.
Okay.
I think that's actually how almost every AoE cap spell works, is that it'll just randomly pick like a target.
Okay.
Maybe not random, but something.
This is maybe yet another conduit, right? That at least adds some. Oh, something happened. I have to react skillfully to this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is good.
The only annoying thing about it is that, like, if you use default UI, there would be no way for you to know that this guy has the debuff that you just press blade dance for, unless you like manually like tab target to every mob every time you blade dance.
Right. Okay. And then Demon's Touch is the last one you have.
Yeah, and I kept this one for last because, well, first of all, it never worked since it was introduced in the alpha, so that's a no-no from the start. Second of all, from the spell data, it's supposed to affect all of our abilities, but right now the only abilities that remove the buff from you basically is I-Beam and Chaos Strike. So I don't know if it's only working for those abilities, because a 3% buff when there's a 5% variance on your spell, it's kind of hard to figure out if it's working or not.
Right.
But I assume it's not working because it should affect all of our spells, but only Chaos Strike and I-Beam remove the buff.
I mean, for what it's worth, though, it does say it increases the damage of other abilities, not all of your other abilities.
Well, yeah, but from the spell data, the flag on the spell is supposed to affect.
Oh, is it? Okay, I got you.
Everything that we have in like those 5 abilities in the spell book, they're all supposed to be included.
So is the way it's supposed to work that it gives you a buff and the first spell you hit consumes that buff, or is it?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess then a third, somewhat interaction ability.
Yes.
Right.
It's kind of annoying though, because it kind of promotes Demon's Bite ability, Demon's Bite ability, Demon's Bite ability play style. Whereas if you play like with Blind Fury, for example, you would want to like Demon's Bite, then I-Beam. That I-Beam will give you full Fury. And then if you want to use the Conduit, you would want to use Demon's Bite again, but you're already at max Fury. So it's kind of like counterintuitive in some ways like that.
Right. So do you want to?
It's a little bit awkward to use.
Do you want to waste resource, or do you want to waste your X% damage
exactly.
buff? Right. I got you.
Right. Yeah.
I think something like that would be cooler on like a different ability, but
it's a little bit weird like that. And also, it does not work when you pick Demon Blades. So if you pick Demon's Blade, you're stuck for the rest of the week with a useless Conduit.
Well, no, that's not true, man. You just go to your 3rd, 4th, and 5th Demon Hunters that you've leveled.
That's true.
In.
That's true.
Come
I
on.
forgot. Yeah,
you're making
right.
it sound so bad here. You gotta see the silver lining, right, Avade?
Yeah.
I have a question.
Shoot.
The repeat decree for Kyrian, it's showing as 45% damage at rank 1. Is that correct?
Yeah.
I don't. And then it goes down?
It's supposed to go up, but it goes down on the tool. I don't know if it's Wowhead that pulled it badly, or if it's just the tooltip that reads wrong, and it should read like the cooldown is decreased, maybe.
I think it's
So
supposed to
that
be
way
damage.
Going down would make sense if they reduce the cooldown.
No, it's definitely damaged. I use that on my Vengeance for M+. It like a second sigil comes down and hits again for X damage, so obviously it makes no sense that it's a decreasing damage, so something's not right there. I don't know if it's in game or for on your guys.
And also, fun interaction, the second sigil does not prop like lesser soul fragments,
Correct.
so you can't like double dip that.
I mean, it's good for Vengeance, it already overflows, but yeah.
I think if it starts at 45, it actually could be good for Havoc in AoE
An M plus.
Mythic plus
Mhm.
type scenarios. Yeah, I think it would have to be like maybe 5+ targets depending on the rank, but
Mhm.
that it would be better than having Sinful Brand.
People are saying it's 100 minus the shown percentage, so it's just like a display issue, I suppose,
Oh, okay,
like a
I
logic
see.
display issue. So it's 55% at min, etc.
Yeah.
What anything notable about the Necrolord or Night Fae potency conduits? Brooding
I
Pool.
forgot
And,
what the Necrolord does.
Necrolord
I think
is
it's just
increases
CDR, right?
It's duration.
increases the duration of fodder to the flame
Oh.
by 5 baseline up to 20 seconds.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know the exact percentage of that, but like the majority of the value of that is the demon soul that you get. So the circle on the floor is kind of like whatever.
And then the Night Fae one is, excuse me, it increases the damage of the hunt's strike against its primary target by baseline 20 up to 48% increased damage.
Yeah, I mean that's the runner-up, I'm pretty sure, but like on sim numbers. But again, like it'd be nice if it affected the damage of like everything, because with the rework, like how you can like cleave with it along the path, it'd be nice if it affected everything, but it only affects the target, so
Yeah, I don't know. The
it's
rework was kind of weird.
unfortunate.
I didn't like it.
Is
very
it
much.
now a 1.5 minute cooldown instead of 3?
It's
Okay.
1.5 minute. The debuff duration on primary is a minute. So it's like the thing is, but the debuff does nothing now except heal you,
Leech.
right? Which it's not working currently, at least not for Vengeance. So you really just have kind of one big boom, a bit of minor AoE along the way, and then like that's it. No resource return, nothing else. So it's a bit. It seems still a bit underwhelming from an output perspective in PvE.
They at least made it slightly better by reducing the cooldown, because like
True.
let's say that ability is competitive single target as a 3-minute cooldown, how it used to be, you would just never play it just because it's so like niche, such a long cooldown, whereas like Central Brand's like 1 minute on demand, large amount of damage burst, which is useful even if it's simmed less than the hunt in like so many scenarios. Like let's say an ad spawns, you're gonna have like good damage for that ad because you have Simple Brand. I don't think like the hunt would ever really do that much or even feel like it's doing that much.
Yeah.
And of course, in any AoE fight, you know, pre change of this, it would have been like awful. So I think it'll just depend on the tuning, how this new one works out.
I gotta say though, on a bright note, and obviously there's ifs and buts to this, but generally speaking, your potency conduits are actually a lot of fun, and seemingly add at least a bit of depth to your, as you guys are saying, otherwise more stale play style, which is not the same thing you can say about the majority of the ones that we've seen here on these shows, because a lot of them are just like, here's 10% damage to this ability, here's 20% damage to this ability, that don't add a lot of interaction. So it's nice to see that you guys have multiple ones that at least give something for your brain to, process a proc or a reaction. I'm not sure you guys feel about that, but positive win, maybe?
Yeah, I like them for the most part.
I think that they're good. I just think there's a little bit of unfortunateness with, how Demon's Touch works and how Dancing with Fate incentivizes you to play First Blood and ignore the other two options.
Right. Okay. Let's
that's pretty good.
okay, so that covers the Soulbind's conduits. Let's dive into legendaries. Let me just pull them up here. So actually I can keep up both. There we go. Notables in legendaries. We don't have to talk about the neutrals, obviously. Just the general DH slash vengeance. Slash havoc ones. I think there's one, if I'm not mistaken, that technically you can use from vengeance, right? Like defensive option. I don't think you ever will. But just for what it's worth, you can use their Immo Aura one. I don't know if that's worth mentioning for you guys, but
Yeah,
nonetheless,
but yeah, that you don't use
yeah,
damage.
exactly.
I mean, very. If gear swapping was a thing, you could, I guess, in
Right.
keys if you ever ran into a one-shot magic damage boss.
But nonetheless, let's dive into it, gentlemen. Whoever wants to tackle it first, and we'll have a nice little chat here about legendaries for Havoc. Don't be shy now, children.
The Feldev I-beam one, just flat damage. It, I mean, I think it's cool because they gave Vengeance Feldev that they're kind of given this, like, you know, your other spec guy shows up and does damage. You know, it's kind of cool, whatever. Kind of unfortunate that it snapshots where you are facing when you first press it. So if you want to, like, do like a little spin and press your I-beam, because I-beam doesn't actually instantly do damage when you start the channel. It takes like a quarter of a second. And so if you do like a little spin, your little Feldev guy is going to spawn and breathe on no mobs, and so you have to be a little bit more careful. But I mean, it's does a lot of damage. Seems fine to me. I mean, doesn't really add very much, but
right.
I don't know what their goal is for these legendaries, so it seems fine to me that it exists.
Okay.
The I-beam CD or the I-beam 20% chance thing is horrible. It's like you're just playing a lottery spec. You know, you could play this and get I-beam procs back to back to back to back to back, and then you're owning, or you could just never get it to proc, and then you don't have a legendary equipped. It's just too RNG. I don't think that it would be solved by somehow making like a deck of cards system where it like evens out the RNG. I just think it shouldn't be RNG, and it should just be redesigned slightly in some different way. I mean, I know a lot of people loved Radons from Legion, which was I-beam CDR whenever your I-beam did damage. That would have been a great place to put it, but
I think
this is stuff like
I think they took this from, it's a Torghast power, right? Like a toned down
Yeah.
Torghast power. That's right. Okay.
well, I think I mean that's cool from Torghast, but
Right.
like, not in the real game.
Yeah, not practical. Like I'm trying to
Yeah.
have reliable DPS output kind of stuff here. All right.
Yeah, that's the biggest issue about it, because if you get lucky, like Avade said, you're a god, but like you only have 1 in 5 chance to get lucky. So more often than not, you're just gonna feel like, because what happens when you have that equip is every time you I-beam, you go like ooh, and then you're like nope, and then the next one you're like ooh, nope.
And it's worth noting it could chain proc too, so you can go oh.
Yeah, exactly. So when that happens, you have that high like moment of like, yeah, like this is insane. I'm OP. Like I just got like a meta's worth of like demonic chain proc back to back to back. Yeah, I'll be in meta for the next like minute and a half. This is amazing. And then you do another dungeon and you don't get a proc until like the trash pack before the last boss, and that's it.
Well, it seems like the police have heard that we were having fun about Havoc. I don't know if you can hear those sirens in the background, so we're gonna have to cut the show short, guys. It's been a pleasure having you. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, but it does proc like meta, right? So not only are you a DPS god for a bit if you get those lucky procs, but then all of a sudden you're just like indestructible for 6 seconds 6 seconds compounding at a time. But yeah,
I'd say you're much less indestructible now. Demon Hunter survivability is like severely nerfed.
You think so?
This expansion.
So
yes.
Do you think they're not going to have that niche of like, you know, because one of the strengths that, well, at least I quoted, you know, and I suppose it's true more so on the live client right now, but you know, they have good utility, good mobility, and one of the things that that everybody kind of references is that you know, Demon Hunter survivability is always a really good tool to have. Do you think that is just like a niche that's not going to really exist anymore?
I wouldn't even, I would definitely not call it a niche anymore. I mean, you passively take 10% reduced magic damage, which is, you know, very nice, but actively your blur is as strong as a bark skin. Your leech is as strong as if you didn't. It's a little bit stronger as if you didn't even take soul rending, if you took soul rending this next expansion. So, and also people probably aren't going to be playing Demonic Appetite, and Demonic Appetite is oddly, you know, a lot of healing in a DPS talent. So if that ends up being a talent that people take, or like people opt into taking it because it's close and gives a lot of survivability, then maybe Demon Hunters survivability would be okay from a healing perspective. But yeah, I mean, from what they are now, they're like severely nerfed. I think they actually got nerfed a little bit too much, and
Is that right?
but I mean,
Yeah, I mean, like Avade mentioned it earlier, but I wish they would have like nerfed or passive mitigation a little bit instead of nerfing blur that much.
Okay.
Because like with Conduit's ranks up, like when Vicious Ink is like rank 15 or whatever, like we will be back to that like super tanky like state, assuming you slot that Conduit in. But until that, like it is very noticeable how much squishier we are compared to before in dungeons.
Okay. Yeah, this legendary, like I've used it on Vengeance too. It's the RNG is super frustrating with it, and it sucks to have just this kind of level of RNG in terms of power swing attached to like a spec. And I hope they never do anything like that. Roll the bones, but nonetheless, I do agree redesigns in whatever they do with it, but it is fun when it happens. But goddamn, man, it sucks going an entire M plus and then you get like one proc at the end.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, Radon's effect would work perfectly for both Havoc and Vengeance if they wanted to add something in place of that.
True.
Basically, each tick reduce the cooldown by a very small decimal amount. And then if they think that that's too OP, then they could cap it up to a certain amount of time, and I'm sure people would still be fine with it. Like it'd be much better than what it currently is.
Sure.
And have a niche as well. It wouldn't just be like, oh, this performs numerically well, and I'm playing demonic, I'm gonna play this. It would be like, okay, like I will take this if I'm gonna be cleaving or AoEing, sort of thing.
Okay. Moving along then to the remainder of legendaries. We still have the 4 Havoc ones, then we still have Darkest Hour and Half Giant Empowerment for the generals.
Yeah, that'll be it for those. Let's move on.
Okay then. for which the generals, I mean, they're all kind of poo-poo, right?
Yeah, I mean, like no one in their right mind will ever like make those until they've made everything else and they don't know what to do with their soul ashes, because like you can
the half
tell
giant doesn't even work.
What's busted about it?
You don't get
It
bigger.
just doesn't work.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I mean, like, do you see any even like PvP use out of Darkest Hour? Like anything?
Maybe for PvP, because the thing with Darkest Hour is like you can use your darkness, and then the legendary can proc as well. So as long as you use darkness before the legendary procs, the legendary can still proc even though your thing is on cooldown. But it doesn't work the other way around.
Wait, hang on. Your legendary proc consumes your CD?
Yes.
Oh my god.
But if you use it before
Right.
the legendary happens, then the legendary can still proc.
I'm going to go ahead and say that's like probably an oversight, because it was similar for like a Guardian legendary where like Barkskin would give you Frenzied Regen on start and finish, but it would consume your Frenzied Regen charges, which was really silly. And then they changed it so it doesn't anymore. So I'm going to maybe assume. I don't really know how much more attractive it would make it anyways if that were the case.
It wouldn't, but yeah.
But yeah.
But for PvP, I can see some use there for like, if you play like a dampening comp and all you care about is surviving until the other team is in 35 minutes, then, that could be a choice.
Fair.
It procs in CC, so it's actually really good. The only problem I see is that like if you also want to play Desperate Instincts, as soon as the team gets you to 35%, you're gonna blur and dark, and it's just like, all right, man, like you don't need that much. So it's just kind of unfortunate that works like that.
Seems like
it's gonna be way overkill.
Seems like for Half Giant Empowerment and Darkest Hour, they were just kind of like, somebody didn't finish their homework in time, and their homework was to make 4 legendaries for Demon Hunters, and they were like, oh yeah, these 2 as well.
It's also a very weird way of them giving darkness to Vengeance instead of just giving darkness to Vengeance.
Once upon a time, it used to
wasn't
exist for Vengeance, like ages ago, right? It's like early Legion kind of thing, but they that didn't last very long. What about the Havoc specific legendaries? How are you looking there?
They're pretty good for the most part, but suffer from, well, the two like Chaos Theory and the what's it called, the Inner Demon, unless they change the name, they
Inner demons,
suffer
yep.
from the same thing as the darkest the Dark Medallion one. They're just RNG, so you never know if or when or how much they'll proc.
Okay. So we have
So
Chaos Theory Blade Dance has a 10% chance to grant you chaotic blades, increasing the damage of Chaos Strike by 25%, and a chance to refund Fury for an additional 60%. And then what's the other one? Inner Demons Chaos Strike is a chance to unleash your Inner Demon, causing it to crash and deal a bunch of damage, chaos damage to all nearby enemies. Are these like the
yep.
two go-to ones?
No, they're the two that like are like they're good like numerically, but they just they're RNG and they don't work properly.
Oh, okay.
So
I'm
it's a little bit like
And
pretty sure Chaos Theory works like Chaos Theory from Legion, where it is a deck of card system.
no,
Okay.
it's not.
Where oh, it's not actually okay.
No.
Well,
When
that's
when
actually very good.
I spent like 6 hours on streaming like a couple weeks ago just pressing Blade Dance on the target and I got 3 procs.
you streamed
6
that for
hours.
6 hours?
Yeah,
My God.
multiple hours. I 6 might be overkill, but it was multiple hours. And I remembered in chat we were counting the procs, and I got like 3 or 4 procs after a couple hours of just pressing Blade Dance on cooldown.
Have
I think they
you?
put the decimal point in the wrong place.
Yeah, maybe. Dude, 6 hours of doing that? Have you been having a craving for human brains or anything lately, Kib? You feeling all right?
No, I just
All right.
I just have a keyboard that presses R by itself, so I can just chat and watch the thing not proc.
Okay. Fair. On once again though, I got to ask, right, from like a devil's advocate perspective.
Hmm.
We talk about chaos theory as like a gross percentage chance, but the percentage chance to proc at least maybe affects something in terms of gameplay. Like, is there any
Yeah.
silver lining there at all, or is it just kind of like not really with this, or maybe not really what you want to see from a legendary? I don't know.
Well, yes, there is a proc happening, but like you'd press Chaos Strike regardless, so it's basically just a chance to get a damage amp. It's not something that makes you do something different. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Well,
fair.
you may prioritize Chaos Strike over pressing your next Blade Dance because of it or something like that. But I don't know how that math works out.
Yeah, but even like I don't know. If it would buff like a spell like Throglay, for example, a thing that like you don't really use, but then you get the proc, and now it's like, oh, I get to use that spell now. Like that's cooler than just that thing that you were gonna press anyway, doing a little bit
Yeah.
more damage.
Also, this effect is very cool when
Mhm.
used with the talent uh, Cycle of Hatred.
Okay.
However,
Oh boy.
you can't like you don't. So what procs this is Blade Dance, and you don't want to Blade Dance unless you're fighting 3 to 4 to 5 targets or whatever. And so that synergy just never happens. It's very unfortunate because basically during this buff you would have automatic IDEM resets and it would feel really good, but because you don't press Blade Dance on cooldown with that talent selected, because First Blood is right next to it, it unfortunately you don't get to see that synergy, which is why, like Kip said, making Blade Dance work rotationally, maybe having the Fury cost baseline and getting rid of First Blood or something like that would help a lot.
Right. Then the remaining two, one of them we kind of touched upon earlier, Erratic Felcore, the one where you can just ridiculously get your Fel Rush CD down.
Mm-hmm.
Is that basically just mandatory for momentum build?
Not mandatory, but very good and no good at all for anything else, basically.
Okay.
It was very good
For
with the
mount
first
farming.
iteration. Yeah, it was also very good with the first iteration of Unbound Chaos when like it was within your emo window. You could just like Fel Rush and each one of them would get the demon to come down. So for that, it was really good because it allowed you to, get more unbounds going. But now that they changed it to just the next, it's just a momentum legendary, nothing more.
Okay. What do you think of it? Same thing, pretty much.
Yeah, same thing. It's just, I mean, I like using Fel Rush. You get to use it more often, but like from like a, rating and dungeon perspective, like it's nothing really too special besides momentum, and then it actually kind of devalues like momentum even further, like the feeling of it, because you're just always in momentum. So it's just like a 15% flat damage increase, kind of.
Right. Lowers the skill ceiling to it, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the final one, my most hated legendary, as a tank in M+.
What do you mean?
God, it's so annoying. Well, because it's bugged, right? Fell Bombardment.
Is it?
Yeah, there's mobs.
It pulls everything.
There's mobs that like charge in from rooms 400 yards away.
Yeah,
randomly.
but that's because of how Throwglaive is coded. That's not because of the legendary.
Okay, well, whatever it is, I hate it. And when people don't use this legendary, it doesn't happen. So that's the way I see it. But
Yeah.
what are you guys' thoughts about Fell Bombardment?
I like it a lot from the simple fact that it makes you use an ability that you don't use otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
It does a lot of damage as well, which is nice, and it makes me miss Bloodlet even more. So all of these things makes it for a 2 thumbs up legendary.
Okay. Vade, what do you think?
I feel the same. The only thing that's a little weird about it is that like you kind of feel incentivized to track your immolation or ticks, so that you don't like cap at 5, spend a global, and then have it tick again at 5, and potentially lose extra procs. But I mean, whatever. You could just do that. I really like the legendary because, like you said, it reminds me of Bloodlet. Adds a bit of skill as well, and synergizes with that one conduit we talked about.
What's the proc rate like, and is it increased for multiple target? Like, how often are you getting these stacks? It just says has a chance, like
on single target for your emo window, you'll get around like 2-3 stacks on average. But the second you start adding targets, you just get 5 stack almost instantly, because each tick of emo on every target that gets hit counts towards it.
So you're basically hitting Throwglaive like on CD.
Pretty much, which makes
you can only use it a certain amount of times. So,
what do you mean? Like, how so?
Because Throwglaive has a cooldown on it, so it makes the 2 charges Throwglaive talent mandatory when you run.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I got you. But that's what I'm saying. You're basically hitting on CD. It's a bit annoying then.
Yeah.
Like, you must be overcapping 5 a lot, right, in an AOE group.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like on a big AOE pack, like you can do like some crazy stuff, like on the previous pack, when there's like 2 mobs left, you just emo and you charge up your stacks there, and then on the next trash pack, you just throw a 5 stack in, you emo, you get 5 stack instantly, you throw in, and then during that same emo you get another 5 stack and you do your second charge. So you can basically like get like 15 stacks going into one pack if you just pull it preemptively. But again, that's something that like we keep like talking about. It's just like these little like decision in your gameplay that adds a lot. It doesn't seem like a lot when you just explain it like that, like mechanically how it plays, but just that little extra thing that goes into the rotation adds a lot of like, feels good to the way the spec plays.
Fair.
Yeah, and to add on to what he said, if you start with a pull with a bunch of stacks and then spend it, you can I-beam right after and have the conduit buff. So I really like that they added something that takes a little bit of skill to do that.
Cool.
A little bit of thought. Always welcome that kind of stuff.
So
they just need to change how Throwglaive works. No.
To what?
Well, the reason why it pulls stuff from China is because Throwglaive is coded so that you Throwglaive on the mob, and then the 2 target that the glaives bounce to are predetermined. And Throwglaive cannot go on these 2 targets again, right? So like, but since the legendary throws an additional glaive, it cannot go on the targets that your initial Throwglaive would bounce to.
Okay.
So that's why it seeks another target in like wherever it finds it.
So,
and the range of it is 100 yards. So yeah.
So if you're pulling 4 or less mobs, you're gonna pull some other random pack.
Yep.
Huh.
And even if you pull 4 mobs, you're gonna pull other stuff as well. Because the glaive that you throw in is gonna get like the bounce on 2 more, and then you'll get the additional glaive that's gonna go to that one guy, and then it's gonna bounce to something else.
So you need to have a
15, I think.
You need 15 or more to have it not guarantee not pulling anything else.
Oh, is it an extra glaive per stack?
Yes.
Oh.
Mhm.
Okay.
So if I sack Throwglaive against 15 targets, we'll put up the
It's
little
gonna stay
ID
in
thing.
in the pack. Yeah.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
Okay.
it's gonna seek.
Fair enough. Okay. I mean, they'll probably have this ready by like 9.3, I think. So
Yeah.
you'll have time to gather the soul dust you need by
Well,
then.
the one simple change they could do is have each like additional glaive be a brand new cast of Thoroglaive, right? Instead of just being a cast from the first one. That way, each of these extra glaive would have their own like targets that they pick,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Okay. That makes
So
sense.
that way it wouldn't go outside of the group.
Yeah. And then you just have to worry about 2 or less as well. So that third bounce doesn't like seek something random either.
Well, it's only the initial bounce that's gonna seek, right? The other
Oh, I
bounce are
see.
just gonna
Okay.
pick whatever's in range.
Yeah. Yeah. I got you. Yeah. I mean, I'm going to like, it sounds like something it's probably on their to-do list when they get to their bug
Yeah.
stomping and they'll
Yeah, I'm
smash it
sure.
out.
It's probably just not a priority over like
Yeah. Yeah.
system stuff and whatnot.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I think in general, though, like, you get a lot of, on a more serious note here, you get a lot of, memes about like lol 2 months left kind of thing. I think a lot of these things just haven't been a prio yet. You know what I mean? And they're just gonna have a
Right.
big QA session for the next month or something and stomp all this out. Whereas right now they're probably just focusing a lot on, Covenant stuff and who knows what else. Maybe, hopefully, the mall.
I would be very surprised if that went live, right? Like
Right,
I
right.
trust Blizzard enough to do that. It's not a big deal. I'm sure they all know about it as
Yeah.
well. It's just kind of funny. I hope it doesn't go live.
Yeah, well, we all do. So for the most part, you have some thinkers for legendaries, but some stinkers as well. More so, I suppose, in the neutral category, right? Like Darkest Hour and Half Giant kind of. Is there anything you guys would have loved to see as a Havoc, or maybe just generic, either one, legendary return as the legendary kind of toolkit that Havoc has that didn't make it in, like a former tier bonus or legendary from Legion or anything like that you were hoping to see, or maybe we'll see in a future major patch?
Well, like I said,
think,
the rad-ons.
Mhm.
But yeah, that was
Yeah.
basically it.
That's the reduction on I-beam based on targets hit.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. That and another one I'd like to see come back would be the legendary bracer effect for Havoc in Legion that made each subsequent bounces of your Throglaive deal additional damage.
Okay, so target number 2 and 3 took more and more damage.
Yeah, they took 50% more than the previous target.
Okay, cool.
So you could skillfully throw a glaive at that guy so that it would bounce to this one, then this one, to get more damage on the priority target. But it was especially good because Bloodlet was a talent as well back then.
Okay, I got you.
I think a lot of people also like the meta reduction shoulders because people don't like the 4-minute meta. There was basically for all the fury you spent, they reduced the cooldown of meta. So I'm sure something like that would make people happy for sure. I can't really think of any other legendary that would really have to come back. They were pretty good.
So then, now that we've kind of covered, we've done our deep dive on Havoc now for Shadowlands, right? As to where it stands, all the systems, all the powers, all the core of the class. Do you guys feel that these systems, Conduit, Soulbinds, Legendaries, the Covenant ability, etc., these SL systems, do you think they fill the gaps into the issues of the core gameplay that Havoc has? Namely, the one that we've been focusing a lot on is lack of depth in gameplay, like simplicity in gameplay. Do you think these help address some of those things in the right direction? It seems that it does, maybe a bit, but what are you guys' thoughts on that?
I think it does not completely fill the gap, but it definitely is better and fits in better. Like I don't think the crack is full, but the gap is full. But this may be an unpopular opinion, but I do think Shadowlands Demon Hunter is better than BFA Demon Hunter.
Ooh.
From a design perspective.
Okay. I've been seeing a lot of. Do you agree with that, Kib?
Yeah, I agree. Well, with the last round of changes that they did, yes. Before that, no. But I think before that, no one agreed with it because, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, because the majority of the time it seemed like DH players were very unhappy with what was happening in, so far at least, the direction they were taking in
Yeah.
Shadowlands. What reversed it? Like, what put it over to make it positive? What was the big thing?
Well, Unbound Chaos was brought in, so
Mm.
that gave us like an interesting tool that incorporated our like unique mobility into like our toolkit, and they brought back like Furious Gaze, which is like, you know, that one trait that made everything like broken in BFA, but they brought it back as like a percent haste instead of just rating, which gives us like some stat scaling to look forward to for future patches instead of just being like, you know, good at the start and becoming progressively worse as the expansion goes on, and every other stat class gets, you know, like, hey, I have more crits, so my this thing procs more often and whatnot, whereas like Havoc has nothing, but now we have like percent haste scaling, so we're actually gonna like, you know, follow along with every other spec as they scale through from patch to patch with that.
Okay.
Maybe not as strong, but
Yeah,
a
but
little
at least
better
it's
before.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would really like to see Chaos Strike crit Refund Fury come back.
Yeah, that's a big one on my list as well.
How come? Just add like depth, something to react to, or
Just have a hook, you know, like, because like we said earlier, like we're gonna stack haste till the end of time right now, and after that, like, well, verse, I guess, because the other stat do nothing.
no, no,
So
no.
like having like a hook with crit would be nice to be like, we're gonna
Diminishing
do haste and
returns
crit.
on gear disagrees with your stacking haste to the end of time thing. Although you'd probably still do it beyond the
Well,
25% if it's that OP, right?
it's haste, yeah, it's haste percent as well, so it's not affected by the DR.
Oh, fair, true, true. It's just pure on gear. That's the DR is
Yeah,
there. Very
yeah.
true. All right, so kind of there's a lot of meme about Havoc, myself included, to be fair, about that it's like brain dead and simplistic and whatever. And one of the main things that people always joke about is that it's like a, you know, like a 3-button class, whatever. The reality is, if we're just to put memes aside, there's actually a lot of melee classes that baseline have like 3 rotational buttons, right? Maybe 4, anywhere from like, let's say 3 to 5. So I don't think Havoc's like particularly on its own in that, but like, why does it get that rap constantly, or that rep rather constantly, that, you know, they're just like so brain dead? It is just like the simplicity and the fact that the buttons don't really interact with each other too much, or
Just because there
I
always
think
has to be
so.
one.
Yeah.
because there always has to be one. Fair.
Well, I think Havoc, like, I agree with you that a lot of other classes are very similar in how little buttons they have, but I think Havoc is like the worst of them all, and so it shines like a spotlight on them.
But
Right.
like, what do you mean the worst? Because 3 buttons is 3 buttons, right? Like, it doesn't matter the color of your class. It's not like one 3 button is
Well,
worse than the other. Do you
it's
mean
not.
like in
It's
terms of depth, or
in terms of depth. Yes.
okay, okay,
Because, you know, right now in BFA, it's if it's not on cooldown, press it. Otherwise, build spend. You know, like even Outlaw's very very simple, but then you have Roll the Bones, and so like there's some skill in how you can re-roll to benefit whatever scenario you're in. You know, Windwalker is actually, in my opinion, very simplistic, but you know, you can choose to do. Actually, there's Mark of the Crane, right? Like you can choose to like. I don't know. I actually don't think there's that much going on with Windwalker, to be honest. That was maybe a bad example, but
I think Windwalker
Most melee
is,
are in the same boat though of being rather like straightforward, but
yeah.
most melee also have a button to press for AoE, so they're like rotation like change
uh-huh.
depending on how many targets they're attacking, or they have like some sort of proc, or they have like, you know, and Havoc has like, well, you pick these talents, so you press that button now instead of just these other two, and here you go.
I would definitely say Windwalker, and you know, maybe unpopular opinion here, but I would definitely say Windwalker and Feral are more involved melee specs than Havoc, in terms of like complexity. I don't want to say that, like, I don't think anything in this game baseline for any class, I think you guys will agree, is like monumentally high skill cap. Like, it's not the hardest video game in the world.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that there's more to look at, more interactions, more priorities, etc. in something like Windwalker than Havoc, in my opinion. I don't know how familiar you guys are with Windwalker and Feral and things like that.
I do have something to say about that, actually.
Yeah, sure.
One is that I think that the fact that you looked to explain that there's these two classes that are harder than Havoc, even though they're not, that much harder, is the same reason why people look to find what the easiest class is, and then everyone loves to know like what's the best, what's the best, what's the worst, everyone always wants to know that. That's why there is Havoc, and that's why everybody picks on it. Sure. To answer your initial question, and then the second thing is that I don't actually think Windwalker, like, I don't want to make this a Windwalker session, but like,
sure.
I think Windwalker Mastery is actually like a bit of a trick. Like you look at it and you think like, oh, okay, like I don't have to press the same button twice in a row. Actually, pretty interesting, right? It's like that mastery can be boiled down to: don't Tiger Palm twice in a row, don't Blackout Kick twice in a row, don't Spinning Crane twice in a row. That's it. Because you can't Fist of Fury twice in a row, you can't Rising Sun twice in a row. It's not that in depth, to be fair, but
no, I completely agree with you, and which is why I was saying it's not like there's nothing crazy about it, right? But it's just when you compare that interaction or thought process you have to like Havoc stuff, it's slightly more involved.
Yeah.
But like I completely.
Well, I mean, certainly if Havoc had Windwalker Mastery, it'd be more interesting,
right,
than what it currently is.
Yeah, but I completely agree with you. I certainly like it shouldn't be painted as like a night and day thing, and you have to be like,
yes,
a keyboard god to like do Windwalker, and otherwise you have to be like an amoeba to do Havoc. I totally agree.
But then there's also the other side of the same coin, whereas like when you change one talent and you just pick momentum now, you become one of the like hardest melee to play optimally.
You think so?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
To optimize melee uptime on the boss. To optimize melee uptime on the boss with like constantly fell rushing and the spatial awareness that you need, because you keep like running everywhere all the time, that by itself is like way harder than like not pressing the same button twice in a row, or like pressing rip when you have 5 combo points and stuff like that.
So it must be then like a nice kind of breath of fresh air Avade to have that like skill ceiling grow, like to be able to differentiate yourself from like more amateur or new players to the class. So you can kind of tell who knows what's going on with Havoc. So I guess then like overall, like mostly positive talent tree changes you guys are thinking for SL.
Yeah,
maybe not talent tree, but everything else.
Like
yeah.
play
talent tree's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, talent tree is fine as well. It just First Blood is still there, so it's kind of annoying.
Yes. Yeah.
So we're definitely not in the boat where there's anything extreme here, like what some other like shows and specs and classes have called out as like we don't need like a complete we don't need like a Shadow Priest redesign to Havoc or anything like that. In your guys' opinion?
No,
just couple talents reshuffling, a couple baseline abilities, but I think that's true for most specs as well.
Yeah, no, I hear you. It's just I guess the mental leap that it's not really mental leap, but I think the realization that most people have to come to terms with for Havoc is that like there's, from listening to you guys for the past 2.5 3 hours, there's a very very very, beyond anything we've seen so far in the show, there's a very clear divide in terms of outside of any other power, including talents. Baseline, the spec is very simplistic, and Blizzard has made a very hard attempt to make sure that any complexity that you add to Havoc is not baseline, right? From everything we've looked at this point, conduits, legendaries that even like some slight procs here and there, talents. I mean, it's pretty undeniable at this point, in my opinion at least, that the spec will never, at least for this expansion, I don't want to say never, but will likely not see baseline complexity added because they just don't want it, right? They want it to be that intro class. What do you guys think?
Yeah, and I also think it's really hard for them, and I give them credit because there's so many people who love momentum, and then there's so many people who hate it so much, and so it's like how do you how do you make both of those players happy? It's like impossible. You either just make one version of it better for half the expansion, then the other version better for the other half, but then people are still going to be upset. You can make one better if it's like played optimally, and then one better if it's like played a little bit less optimally, but then there's always a meta that evolves, and then you end up just not being able to pick what you want, but you end up picking what is the best. And so it's hard. I can't even think of a complex mechanic to add to Demon Hunter that would like satisfy everybody. So
Kib, what do you think? Is that just
pretty much same thing? Yeah, like you obviously, like, they can't please everyone, but I think they're obviously doing a better job than what if you look at just like Twitter and stuff, like what you see. It's obviously easier to just complain and point fingers than to come up with like solutions to all of these like issues that people like have personally. And obviously they always have to think about the global population of the game, not just like the two like dudes like talking on another guy's like stream, because obviously
that
if
sounds
the
so
class
bad.
would be exactly how I want it,
right?
it would be very different than what I mean I assume probably the majority of the people that play Havoc wants. But
True, but
I think they're doing a good job with what they can. But to go back to your original point, yes, I don't think we'll see, at least in this expansion, obviously, because I don't think we'll see much change to Havoc until it goes live, beside maybe like number tuning. I think that's what we'll have for this expansion, and I think it's an upgrade over BFA, so like we have to be happy about that, right?
yeah, no, I think I think one of the biggest, the coolest things from these shows, and you guys included now, is just seeing these like very kind of experience based or educated viewpoints, or experience based viewpoints, whatever you might say, that really counters why some of the community's thoughts are really just that they don't match, right? Things like the amount of depth you can add to Havoc versus its baseline, whereas people are just, and myself included, I'm guilty. Yeah, like I played it a bit on alpha and beta, and I was like, oh, this is just, I hate this. There's no interaction. It's boring and whatever. But really, you can build into it at least, right? To add some fun to the spec.
Rotationally,
Yeah.
I mean, every class has something that they can do.
It's just a matter of tuning at this point, obviously, because like, yeah, I could say like these are the talents that I like the most, but at the end of the day, like, we're all like somewhat of like slaves to the tuning, obviously, at the end. So
Yeah, of course. I mean, if they just buff something by 500%, then you have to go play that.
yeah, exactly. Even if it's like the worst thing in your existence, like, yeah, if they buff it enough, like, you kind of have to play it.
Yeah, that's what they did with Blade Dance and BFA. Actually, I think Demon Hunter is the worst performing spec in BFA Alpha and Beta.
Really?
Correct me if I'm wrong.
I
think it was
remember.
actually like the worst, and then they buffed that, and it became like competitive.
Well, in BFA Alpha and Beta, I remember like Unbound Chaos, like the trait was literally like 60% of your damage.
Oh yeah.
Target.
That thing was broken.
Even on single target, it was like 60% of your damage. And then they removed it and they compensated with buffing like Blade Dance, or was it First Blood or Blade Dance that they buffed, or both?
I think they buffed both.
Yeah.
I think they buffed First Blood by like a number that was greater than 100% or something like that.
Before we we'll jump into Q&A here in a second. I started taking them in chat, so just give me 1 sec. Chat. Biggest one, or your biggest, so one thing, wish list thing for Havoc from you guys, if they were to be able to implement it before BFA. Avade?
Only one thing?
Just the one big, yeah, yes. we just spent 3 hours talking about it, but I mean, one
Yeah,
generally biggest thing, but like,
Yeah.
the thing that you're just like, man, this would be the best
If I
thing
was
ever.
forced to pick one thing, I would probably just be like to bring Bloodlet back baseline. Just make sure that the 2 charges of Thoroughglaive is baseline as well. I just think that in and of itself adds a lot of complexity. It adds the ability for them to add on to that spell and do things with it A lot of people like it. I don't know anybody that doesn't like it. It solves a lot of problems and gives them more room to create more new and interesting things.
More, Kib.
I mean, Bloodlet is obviously up there, but First Blood baseline would be the other one I think that everyone would like to see as well. So
Okay.
that's the other one.
All right. Let's nail some a few questions here at the time we have. Captain says, Demon Hunters are one of the few specs that have one utility row. Would Demon Hunters be okay with having 3 of their baseline utility skills as talent row and having 3 of their talents baseline to put them more in line with other classes as far as available utility and baseline damage skills?
Are you saying to make 3 utility rows in place of the damage rows?
Would you? I'll repeat it one more time.
Yeah.
I think it's take 3 baseline abilities and make it into a talent row, and take like Blur, Darkness, and like something else, and put those as talents. I think that was the question.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure though.
Captain, you want to? Well, if he's still there. I mean, this was like a second ago, so.
But
we can. I'll tell you what. Let's come back to it once he clarifies. Yeah, okay. And I'll keep an eye on it. The next question was, are you guys, with the way things are looking right now, Avade, you're in a bit more of a tricky situation, I suppose, because you got to play what you got to play. But are you guys planning on maining DH in Shadowlands right now?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't play anything else. I might tank Mythic Plus on something else, but I'm gonna be DPSing on my Demon Hunter. It's like the only thing that really keeps me playing the game right now.
Okay. Do you think that DH is overloaded in terms of utility that it brings to raid? Super high mobility, strong AoE burst, damage reduction CD, and magic debuff as examples. We touched on this in the beginning of the show a bit, but.
So is that a question in reference to what will be in Shadowlands or what it was in BFA?
No, it's basically, do you think you have to... Well, I mean, both, right? Do you think you have too much in Shadowlands still?
No, absolutely not.
No?
There's just so many other classes gain so many things. Like, absolutely not.
Okay.
And all these things that they listed in their question, like the insane like tank ability, I guess, if you want, like being like unkillable and stuff like that all got nerfed a lot.
Okay.
And at the same time, like, DK's got AMZ, and I don't know what other classes got really, but I assume DKs are not the only one that got something back.
Well, regard. No, you're right. Prot Warrior got Whirlwind. It's really good.
Ooh.
Yeah. Fair. Yeah.
Like Rogue's got like, Shiv for Soothe. A lot of classes gain like little tiny things that help in Mythic Plus and stuff like that. Like Priest got Mind Soothe to be able to skip packs.
Mind Soothe is big.
All warrior specs have mass power flag. Like tons of classes got a lot of like really nice unique stuff. And I think it's good because I think in BFA I would agree with that question that was asked, but I think in Shadowlands with everybody gaining so many things, no, I don't think that's really the case anymore.
Okay.
Demon Hunter didn't really gain utility in Shadowlands, and I think that's all good. That's how it should be. Everybody should have strengths and weaknesses in terms of utility.
So it's basically like you had too much, but now everybody's played catch up. You feel like in accordance with, you guys got nerfed in some areas like survivability. That it's kind of.
I don't think we had too much. I just think a lot of people lost a lot of shit going from Legion to BFA, and they've now got it back. That's a better way of putting it.
Okay. Next one is, can you ask about chaotic transformation becoming baseline?
Oh yeah, that's a me question. I'm pretty sure.
Is it?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure somebody's. I mean, I basically. I've wrote something about this, but chaotic transformation is about like you basically I-beam Blade Dance, meta Blade Dance I-beam, so that because when you meta your Blade Dance and I-beam get reset, a lot of people like it because it's like burst damage, it's free, and people think, oh yeah, I mean I'll take it, it's free. I don't really like that because it takes away from using meta defensively or as like an immobility tool. you can't, and also it ties your meta to your I-beam cooldown. So if you want to meta right now because there's a burst amount of damage or something like that, or you want to meta to immune something, you have to look and quickly see like, okay, if I meta right now and my I-beam's coming off cooldown in 5 seconds, I'm gonna lose so much damage. I'm just gonna not immune it. I'm just gonna eat it because I mean I just can't lose that much damage. It's too much to lose. So you find yourself very frequently using it just for the chaotic transformation effect instead of the other cool things that it can do. Like, oh, I want to leap across the room right now because I want to move really fast. Like, you're de-incentivized to actually do that. Same with meta immune. So I remember in Legion, I would always look for ways to use meta as an immunity because it was actually super fun to do. But in BFA, because chaotic transformation was like such a staple artifact or essence or whatever it's called, very, very often I found myself not actually doing it. And it's a bit of a shame because meta, I think a lot of people think of meta, like the activation of it is actually really unique and cool. It's immunity, it's mobility, it's a stun, and being kind of locked into using it right after an I-beam blade dance into another blade dance I-beam is just kind of restrictive and obnoxious. And I'd rather they remove it and then tune Demon Hunter around not having it, personally.
Right. Okay.
I don't know how Kib feels about that, though.
What do you think, Kib?
I don't really have a strong opinion about it, but everything that Avade said is true. So, but
Okay.
I don't really care either way.
Nice and easy going. This one's not really a question as much as an FYI, I suppose. They say, for my testing, the extra Fel Dev from the Illidari Legendary is actually mirrored to your I-beam damage. It doesn't matter where you aim it. Just because you said like one of the minor things was, I don't know if you guys agree with that or not.
I just don't think that's true.
I'll have
Fight,
to
fight,
double check that carefully because like my I-beam, the amount of ticks I get from I-beam and Fel Dev are not the same. And if they're tied, they should have the same amount of hits.
Okay.
If it did spin, that would be great. But
well, I don't think the
I
graphic spins. I don't think what he says is that the graphic spins. I think he says that whatever your high beam hit will also get hit by Fel Dev, regardless of where it's facing.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, that would
But
be really good as well.
I don't think that's actually working because they don't have the same amount of like hit count. I'll have to double check to make sure. But...
Okay. Either way, just an FYI.
Yeah.
So this question says, I got to reword it slightly, but basically the question says, for Unbound Chaos being kind of a broken... It basically says, how do you feel about Unbound Chaos being such a massive amount of your damage and breakdown versus everything else? Like, do we need some rebalancing of ability output there,
or? For cleave and dungeons and stuff like that, I think it's perfectly in line with what I see other specs do in terms of overall damage. For single target, it might be a little bit strong, but like not that much.
Okay.
I agree. I think the only thing you could argue against that is just like if you miss it or something, it's like massive to like miss that ability. But that's about it.
Question here: Do you guys think there will be a problem again with haste RPPM like we saw in BFA for Havoc?
As long as they don't keep buffing Furious Gaze, they won't be.
I mean, hasted RPPM will still be OP for Havoc because, Furious Gaze exists, but it's not going to be as broken as it was in BFA. But obviously, like, you get a haste steroid proc, obviously, like, hasted RPPM procs are going to be good for that class. It's just how the game works.
What are your guys' thoughts, both of you, on mastery for Havoc? It doesn't seem like it scales very well, and I'm curious if we just need a mastery rework at this point.
I'm down. Like,
I think the mastery is really cool. It's just First Blood being the meta ability to be using is like making it worthless.
So do you think Avade then is just like a scaling thing that they could fix but keep the same design on mastery?
I don't know what the fix would be. I don't think it's a scaling fix.
Okay.
It's just like It would probably be best to redesign it, but it's just unfortunate because I actually like the design. It's just unfortunate that, you know, one of your highest damaging abilities is just not affected by it at all, and that's what makes it bad. It's not inherently bad. If all of your damage was chaos, I'm pretty sure mastery would be like your best stat or one of your best stats. So depends on haze.
No strong feelings, kid. You're just kind of like mastery.
Well, I mean, mastery, that's what mastery is, right? It's just you just put a stat on and you get more damage from your spells. Like, it's not like I forget which spec it is. I think it's Ellie Shaman that their mastery just like actually does something, and it's not just like a flat damage increase.
Yeah, like the overload chance. That's right.
Yeah, that's like a cool thing that occurs. Whereas, like, I mean, most masteries for most specs is just like that does more damage,
right?
And it's just very binary, right?
There's been comments in the past that a lot of masteries have become kind of boring. They've just become another numbers boost instead of some of the creative things we've seen in the past.
It's almost like a shitty verse, because at least verse will affect everything you do, whereas your mastery doesn't affect some.
Right.
Yeah. I think if they redesigned Havoc's mastery, they'd probably want to be redesigning like everyone's mastery, which I'd be down for. It just would take a lot of effort.
Fair. Do you guys think Fell Bombardment should replace Fell Barrage in the level 50 talent? It adds much more gameplay altering mechanics, and it's quite powerful and fills that high AoE niche.
That could be I mean, that'd be better than Fell Barrage for sure, but they could also just revert Fell Barrage to like Legion Fell Barrage, and that would work as well. It's very easy to make like Fell Barrage good. You just need to buff the numbers and change how it works mechanically a tiny little bit, and then it's gonna have a niche. I don't think we need to change Fell Barrage completely or remove it.
What do you think of it?
I think that talent row is designed to be like a % damage increase row, and like a kind of like a gameplay altering row, and Fell Barrage doesn't really do that, either of those two things. I think Fell Bombardment does alter gameplay, but doesn't really like give some sort of like % damage increase, which doesn't have to, but I think it's a good idea, but maybe not the most ideal. And then Kib's idea is also like pretty good, but still I don't think it solves everything. And I just don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
Like, I don't know the solution, right? Like, I don't. It's not an easy question to answer. What could replace that?
Avade, I'm fired up. Wants me to ask you your thoughts on Conflict Major baseline.
Oh man, no comment.
All right then, moving along. The clarification, by the way, to the very first question we had about the 3 baseline, 3 talent thing. They say, yes, like having Imprison, Darkness, and maybe your AoE stun as a single talent row, but then you get 2 Charge Glaive and 2 DPS talents as just baseline things for DH. So trade in some of your utility for some baseline DPS like depth, I suppose.
I don't know if I would use these exact spells, but I like the idea of having like a full like throughput toolkit baseline and having talents being utility based. I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah, that's exactly the question is, can you, like, are you guys fans of replacing an entire row or 2, whatever, of some of your DPS throughput and DPS interactions and turning those talent rows into utility based things and getting rid of those utility tools that you have baseline then?
Well, yeah, actually, kind of. I think if you include utility and mobility, I mean, you can also come up with new things, right? Like,
yeah,
that doesn't have to just take away. It could just add, like, such as, just as an example, the Conduit that gives you movement speed after Fell Rush. I think actually that this is just my opinion, but I think that every class in the game should have a lot of their damage rows just nuked and made, either baseline or just added into other talents, and then have more utility rows, because utility rows are really fun. Because you actually feel like you can pick whatever you actually want on that row. So many people pick different talents on that second to last row, and a lot of people pick different talents on the middle defensive row.
Mhm.
And that's what I think is really cool, is when you see people playing different things, because they're like not they're not directly related to performance, but in a way they kind of are. And that's, yeah, those are actual meaningful choices.
Okay. What do you guys think? Would you rather have momentum have charges and be a charge to your target like Fellblade, and as a result not tie it to Fell Rush? Like have it be its own baseline mobility thing, and Fell Rush is just still Fell Rush by itself?
I mean, at that point, I have a better one. Like, just make it like Tiger Eye Brew instead, and just have you gain charge and you expend your charge and you get a buff for a certain amount of time, instead of like putting a dash to it. If you just want to have like stack things and expend your charges into damage, just Tiger Eye Brew. Yoink something from another class.
Any thoughts there, Vid?
Not really.
No? Okay. Why was the change for Venthyr class ability changed for DH where using the demonic talent would proc the AoE portion? I don't think it ever did it?
I don't think it ever did.
It never did, Death Dealer. It didn't for Vengeance either. That's just like has never been a thing.
That would be unbelievably broken.
Yeah, like super broken.
Yeah.
Let me just see here. For a Havoc talent rework, do you think having a Fury Gen row, Chaos Strike row, Blade Dance row, Utility row, Defensive row, New Ability row, and Gameplay Altering row as a new way for Havoc? Do you think having these as a new Havoc layout would be good?
You're gonna have to repeat the rows again.
So
that was
Basically, one row per ability.
Yeah, one row per ability, and then a utility row, a new talent row, and a gameplay altering row. So once again, there are a Fury Gen row, Chaos Strike row, Blade Dance row, utility row, defensives row, gameplay altering row, and new ability row.
I don't think that's that wouldn't work, because like you're doing a key, well, I'm just gonna pick the AoE on all the spells, and now I'm doing like a patchwork boss, and I'm just gonna pick the single target on all the boss. You don't have a decision to make. It doesn't change anything. It'd be better if they gave us all of the tools baseline, and then we can spec into like differences. Like it's okay that some spells are only good on AoE, but if you have some spells that are only good on AoE, you need to have some spells that are only good on single target as well. And then you can have a talent that makes like one talent like do AoE, and then when you have that talent, and then the other one is like, well, this one does even more AoE, or like just differences like that. But I don't think putting like a AoE cleave and single target trigger on every single spell would necessarily fix anything.
Mm-hmm. What do you think of it?
Well, I think the idea of like having rows dedicated to certain things is like good to have like a theme for each row, but that's pretty much all I really would agree with.
Right.
I mean, I would just go back to what I said earlier about I like utility / mobility / raid utility defensive rows over stuff like that for the reasons Kib gave as well.
All right. Let's say last 4 questions here, guys. Because we could sit here all night in terms of like
one per ability. Yep.
Yeah. What are your guys' thoughts for a talent that could turn I-Beam into something like Focusing Iris, aka you can move while channeling?
A talent? That sounds like a legendary thing, like a convenience legendary thing. Instead of like, instead of the one that makes your meta big, just let you move while you I-Beam. There you go. That's already a better choice.
Okay.
True. Well, yeah, I would agree.
This one, do you like the idea of the final talent row, I assume, deciding the rest of the damage talents, or would you like more fluid options? I guess what they mean to say is like whatever final talent you choose in the talent row, deciding your gameplay
play style,
yeah,
basically.
like the play style and your damage
build.
pile. Yeah. or do you not like that much power in the final talent, bro?
Well, selfishly, I would say that, momentum build. Ideally, no, because like the class would function by default, and I would like momentum build or something like that. But I think if you look back to Legion, like I said before, there's 3 different builds that was played throughout Legion, and I think that's probably one of the best ways of making everyone happy. So I kind of do think that having that last row be kind of your build defining talent. I would just like that to change throughout the expansion, and not just be one build for the whole expansion, so that certain people aren't left out to never have fun
For like 2 years, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right, 2 more questions here, guys. Would you guys rather Chaos Blades replace the current Fel Barrage?
Absolutely, that would be great.
Yeah, it'd be better than Felbarage for sure. Especially in that talent slot, like in that row, basically. It would make more sense than Felbarage.
All right.
It would actually just, I mean, that's like perfect.
But
I mean, that's a great idea.
but do you bring back original Chaos Blades or the later Chaos Blades?
Original would
Yeah,
would
of
make
course.
mastery more more
With the
useful.
mastery snapshotting. So
Okay,
you
it
pre
should
so you
shouldn't
prequel
snapshot.
with Cloud gear on with max mastery. And,
Oh
yep,
no!
yep.
I mean, that was fun, but obviously it shouldn't be a thing.
Yeah.
This is like the giddiest I've heard of Avade all show. at the prospect of something that might not happen. Unlucky. Well, I mean, hopefully it does. Don't get me wrong. Okay, final question. This one always comes from me. If in a magical world, which won't happen, if there was no player power tied to the covenants at all, right? Like just purely lore, aesthetic stuff. Which one do you guys pick?
The Covenant?
Yeah, just like thematically, like has nothing to do with player power. If you had free choice just for, the aesthetics that it brings, like the transmogs and the mounts and the lore behind it, like what's your jam?
I have no clue about the lore, but based on looks, I'd pick Ventir, I think. But in that world, I would pick Night Fade just to annoy some people.
Okay. Evade?
I don't know what the transmogs look like, so maybe my opinion would change, but I would pick Kyrian for the class hall that they have. I'd pick Night Fae for like the looks and like the little, like the feel of Night Fae, and then I'd pick Ventir for Door of Shadows because it's a very useless ability, despite what people like to think.
I agree.
But it's actually really fun and cool. I like it.
Fair. Okay.
And like world content and stuff like that.
So I got some furry lovers, no problem. Cool.
And nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with that. No kink shaming here. All right, that pretty much wraps it up, and we always end this show with a final thought from each of you. Could be anything. You want to address the community, fellow Havoc players, Blizzard, like whatever it may be. Your final thoughts, given the state of Havoc, moving into Shadowlands, etc. What and where your mind stands on those things, Kib. If you need a second, that's fine.
No, I can go first. I think the changes that we got so far in the beta are positive for the, as a globally, they're positive. There's still obviously some minor issues but we'll never get a perfect spec. That died after BRF when they nerfed Demo. But yeah, so mostly positive changes. Good. Going into Shadowlands, I'm excited about the changes. That I couldn't say that in going into BFA, and just a side thing, like don't be too mean to Ketsuki, guys. She's trying really hard, and everyone's bullying her.
Don't bully Katsuki,
But
chat. She's like mom.
also at the same time, you can bully her in the meme channel in the Age Discord.
Very polarizing.
Just there, though. Yeah.
Just there. If I see any bullying outside of that chat.
Yep.
Evade?
Pretty much what I'd like to say is just, if Blizzard needs ideas for how to make Demon Hunter, they should look back to Emerald Nightmare version of when the class came out, and Trial of Valor, of course. There's so many good things about that version of Demon Hunter. And I'd like to tell everyone who wants demonic to be baseline to understand that the class has functioned in the past without demonic as a talent. Just because it was played throughout the entirety of BFA doesn't mean that you have to play demonic and that has to be baseline. I think it's a cool talent. I like it, but yeah, not really much else to say other than that.
Well, you have the option at least. Nonetheless, gentlemen, I thought this would be a 2-hour endeavor, but just so passionate about all things Havoc, so we went a bit overboard, but that's fine. It was at least for me, it was super enjoyable. I get really lost in these conversations. I love hearing, community expert and community experience and whatever thoughts on these. So nonetheless, that will do it. So guys, thank you very much for coming, Kib and Avade, and spending a bunch of time talking about Havoc. And hopefully you get the things you need, like, not pulling an entire dungeon with your Glaive Legendary. Hopefully you get it soon. But guys, thank you very much for hanging out. And chat, you can see their socials there, so make sure you go check them out. But my dudes, it's been a pleasure, and thank you.
Yep, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
All right, guys. I will zoom out of here so you guys can get going. So thanks again, dudes. I'll catch up with you once the expansion's live, and well, hopefully we see some Havoc changes. Otherwise, guys, chat soon.
Yep.
All right.
See ya.
Later, dudes.
Later.